Hello and welcome everybody to a very special episode of the Ian and Oceans cast. By the way, hi Ian. Quick introduction
Hello.
this time.
Hi.
Hi.
Poor pitiful Oceans fans. You thought a Jojo podcast would feature Zenrato, but it was I, IanWaffles.
Yes. So I guess we owe y'all an explanation because I think most people expected this to be the MHA Sports Festival video. But I don't know if you've seen the news, but MHA is kind of poopy right now.
Oof. So
Yeah.
so poopy, in fact, that your brain thought we were going into the past and you said sports festival.
Oh shit! Yeah, it's the Culture Fest.
And you like
Yeah.
Culture Festival.
I love Culture Festival, but yeah, I'm not in the mood to talk about MHA anymore. At least for
Not
like
for
the
now.
next couple of days. Yeah.
So, in the meantime, yep, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you tell your story. You're the star here this time.
So basically, yeah, I was feeling a bit bummed about MHA. I was feeling in a sad, depressed boy mood. I got all my volumes, threw them around the room. I hit him with the Keyblade. And it was bad. And then I thought, what's a series that could, fix this? What's a favorite of mine? And I thought JoJo's, and I said, wait, I haven't watched JoJo's, but I know someone who has, Ocean Man. And so yeah, I've always wanted to watch JoJo, but it's very long, and so it's one of those things where it just kind of feels like a behemoth you don't know how to tackle. But when you can turn it into content, now that's a different story, and talk about it with your buddy. So that's been my goal. Is we're going to talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I am a complete newbie to this, whereas Ocean Man, obviously, if you watch his channel, he kind of likes it. So
a little bit.
We're gonna discuss it, and he's gonna guide me, a noob, through JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and give me the right takes. So let's do this.
Yes, I am take corrector Oceans.
Yes, exactly. So.
All right, so we will be looking at the first 3 parts in this video, which some of you may know as the Mask Saga or the Dio Saga. So part 1, Phantom Blood. Ian, do you remember what your first impressions were when you sort of jumped into this?
Yeah. So my first impressions were that I really liked the color palette. The fact that there was this fallen carriage, and it's like, all right, this could be just like dark, moody atmosphere, but instead it's purple or whatever the color was. So I enjoyed that. And then as soon as Dio kicked the dog, I knew I was going to like him. So yeah, my first impressions were pretty strong. Over to show my hand real quick, I think these first 3 episodes are the best part of part 1.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, it's cool to mention a color palette because that's one of those big things about the anime. I mean, now you've watched further, so you also know that they really love to play with colors, and it's something that Araki, the author, encourages continuously, as he has iterated and sort of voiced many times that to him there are no canon colors in JoJo. If the scene needs the sky to be purple, it's gonna be purple,
which is awesome.
Yes, it is one of the best parts about the adaptation, in my opinion. Just the way they take that vibe and translate it. Like, I'm gonna say that a few times, I think, in this video today, but I think JoJo's adaptation is a great example of not necessarily a faithful adaptation, but one that really captures sort of the vibe of the original source material and thus succeeds even when it changes things from the manga. Okay, so you're in Phantom Blood. Did you know or did you expect that this story about a Victorian rivalry was just going to turn into a vampire fest? Were you aware of that?
I did in fact know that, but what I didn't expect was that I would appreciate I want money and I'm going to make out with your girlfriend Dio a lot. I think Dio and Jonathan in this first 3 episodes were pretty great. I loved them both. And while I knew it was going to get crazy, I was very happy that we actually sat in just petty rivalry over getting money turned into I'm going to kill daddy. So yeah, no, I knew where it was going to go, but I was not bored having to sit through before it got weird, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because I don't know if you remember that trend on like anime YouTube or anime fandoms where they used to say that, oh, you you need to give every series 3 episodes, right? The 3-episode rule.
Yeah.
And I always found it so funny that Jojo takes exactly 3 episodes for it to really get into like the main plot, but those 3 episodes are still supremely enjoyable by themselves. Where it's just like, oh yeah, it's this Victorian story, and wow, why are Dio and Jonathan so huge suddenly? And what? Vampires?
Yeah. I will say that I think with part 1, I think this is not a hot take, but I think with part 1 especially, it is only bizarre insofar as, yes, if I lived in the late 1800s and vampires appeared, that would be pretty bizarre. But but as an anime, I think the most bizarre part of it is the way it is framed to you. The way you have like Dio doesn't just get out of the carriage and kind of stoically come out. He like anime poses out and then like puts his hands up to his face and it says like swing or whatever. So I definitely think like the presentation overall, especially in these first couple episodes, are really good. And I liked how just absurd it is in that aspect. Like I love the scene of it's the second episode and it's like 7 years later and this is after he killed the dog and the narrator guy is like, Dio and Jonathan, best friends forever, 2 peas in a pod, those 2 best friends over there. It's crazy how far they've come when you really think about it. And then like they they team up and they win the sport or whatever and they're like, oh, Dio, my brother. It's like, Jonathan, my bro. And then it goes into like Jonathan, Dio's head is like, I hate that son of a bitch, what a piece of shit, I'm gonna take his money. And then Jonathan's like, you little stinker, man, Dio, you sure suck for killing my dog and I'll never forgive you. Like I loved that vibe of it was pretty fun.
Good, because what if I told you that actually the anime cuts out quite a bit of like pre-vampire Dio shenanigans?
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so this is a thing mostly with part 1 and 2 where the anime, because they wanted to fit the first 2 parts into the sort of one season, they cut out quite a bit of stuff.
Okay.
And in part 2's case, I think they only cut out bad stuff. So,
good.
Pretty good. They cut out like random fights that really don't need to happen because it's just, I mean, it's more Joseph, which is fun, but it's not like important for anything besides just filling the space. But in part 1, they do cut out some shenanigans with like pre-vampire Dio and Jonathan. There's a whole thing about like Jonathan's treasured bar of chocolate that Dio mischiefs around with.
Okay.
And also like how sort of whole thing with Jonathan and Erina when they're still young and sort of their dating thing is a bit more elaborate in the manga by comparison.
Yeah.
And then this is going a bit further in the first 3 episodes, but Jonathan's Hamon training is a bit more substantial in the manga.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to mention that you enjoy sort of pre-vampire Dio time, because yeah, I've always thought that it was kind of a shame that they cut out so much, but at the same time, it's sort of like it's very clear they wanted to get to the crazy stuff, and so they really streamlined it quite a bit.
Well, I think it also it's just paced really well. Like I think the way they did that was a good idea for like an anime, because by the end of the first episode, you've got all this crazy stuff, and I thought, okay, well, this was fun. I loved seeing Dio murder a dog, but I don't know if this will be fun for like a couple more episodes of just them being petty. So when it was like 7 years later, they're best of friends. I fucking hate you. Like that gave it a new shift. It's like, okay, now they're older. They have new social dynamics. Dio's kind of assimilated into the family. And then that ends with, going to see Speedwagon and all that stuff. And then the 3rd episode is the crazy vampire antics or whatever. I think it's around that time.
Yes.
So I felt like it escalated properly from an episode to episode standard, if that makes sense. So I think that it was probably a good idea. Now I'll have to go check. Maybe the chocolate stuff was peak, but it seemed like they did a good job.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and this is specific to the dub, I think Jonathan's voice actor really, really brings through like that kind of innocent guy voice, but also like someone who will fucking beat the crap out of you if you steal his chocolate.
Yeah,
so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I watched the dub for all these anime for anyone who wants to know. And yeah, I think Jonathan, I know obviously, he's probably everyone's least favorite, and he's my least favorite JoJo, but I don't think he's least favorite in a way of like, oh, because he's the worst, like he's lame. Like I like Jonathan through and through. I like Good Boys, and I think his voice actor especially gives him that appeal. It gives him the Japanese voice for Goku appeal of like the big giant man, and he's like, moo, moo. So you got Jonathan walking around, and I just love in the opening where it's like that dramatic shot of him walking upstairs, and you can just imagine him being like, Dio, you meanie bobini, I got my ham, and I'm gonna shove it right up your mouth. So he's really endearing, and I like him a lot. I like that he's a good boy. He sees that frog, he's like, don't punch the frog, and then he's like, oh, the frog's good. So he loves his dog. They want to go on adventures. He respects women, but not enough because he only protected her because she's a woman. And then he grows to respect her out of love. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think Jonathan's cool. I like his and I think he fits the vibe of what the show is going for. And Dio obviously has that great contrast of getting the best out of Jonathan. So yeah, no, I think Jonathan's really cool. I think the voice acting adds. I think the voice acting really adds to Dio. It's like Endeavor's voice actor, right?
Yes, that's Patrick Seitz.
Yeah, he does a great job. I love everything he says.
Yes, I think. I mean, the JoJo dub is a little controversial because, of course, they have to abide by the copyright changes.
Yeah.
Whereas, obviously, the Japanese voice actors, they can just say Killer Queen instead of Deadly Queen. But I genuinely love the JoJo dub, and I think no matter who you are, Patrick Seitz as Dio is one of the best casting choices I've seen in ages. It just works, right?
Yeah. Well, he's
like, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's the chewing the scenery thing or whatever. Like he's definitely doing that. Like every time he's talking or on screen, your eyes are magnetized to him and you're encapsulated. But I love the little scene with Dio where Jonathan's like, all right, meanie bobini, swear on your dad's honor. And he's like, fuck, I hate my dad. I can't do it. Damn it. And that's what like gets him to be caught. Is just the fact that he can't even lie about his dad being cool, which is really funny and really petty. Like do people like that Dio's goal is to just get money? Because I think that's great. I love that he's just this poor kid. And then he comes into this family who's been very nice to him. They're like, you are my son now. First day on the job, he's like, and you'll regret that, old man. It's going to be my cool house to give to other people. But I won't give it to other people because it is me, Dio.
Well, to answer your question, people are generally very on board with Dio just being Dio, the way he's portrayed in part 1 and then part 3. The thing with Dio is that he's a character that Araki returns to quite a lot, be it through like associations or through direct, presence and flashbacks. And so he does get more complex, sort of retroactively. But then, they release Dio's diary as like a standalone book that you can read, which basically sort of summarizes him as, I learned in the slums that the best way to live is to just take stuff from everyone. So that's what I'm going to do. Fuck everyone else. Get rich. Chase the bag.
Well,
so
I think I was able to get that just from his characterization in part 1, just with something as simple as like he's smart enough to beat a guy at chess or whatever, and then when he wins, he's like, "Eat spaghetti, nerd," and he's like, "Okay, I'll take my $10." Like he feels superior because he is superior to a lot of people, but then also he's been treated like crap for trying to better himself. So now he's in a position where he can better himself, and the system won't be able to fight back against him because he can use all of his charisma in a setting that would work. So Jonathan's kind of a threat to that. So no, I definitely at least understood where he was coming from, even if it's over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as I said, there is more added to him, especially sort of through part 6, which sort of deals a lot with sort of the fallout of Dio existing in the first place. And you get a lot of substance to like his plan. But that's for you to find out going forward. But generally, yes, people are very on board with Dio just being a nasty whore and loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. He's deliciously evil. He loves
Yes.
it.
Yes, he's
He loves the spaghetti now that he can make it himself.
yes.
Put your dog into it and eat it. That's still the best part to me, is that he just put the dog in the inferno, and that one man just didn't pull him out. Like, dude, do your job. And like he doesn't even think it's a dog. He thinks it's a person. He's like, oh no, I just now turned on the fire and someone is making noises. There's probably a person in there. Well, I should probably not do anything about it. That guy deserves to be fired.
Well, we wouldn't have the rivalry being quite as spicy as it was if he had pulled Danny out of the incinerator. So,
I mean, to be fair, he's probably not getting paid enough for this. He's not invested in the dog.
That is also true. But yeah, so, okay. The big question that everyone in the comments is probably at this point screaming for me to ask is, what did you think of Speedwagon?
Speedwagon. Okay. So here's probably my first hot take. I thought he was the most annoying part of part 1.
Damn it, folks, we didn't get him. Mission failed.
Let me give you an example of what I mean. By Jove, he punched Dio in the face with the right hook on the side in which his eye was blinded. That man is a man among men, fighting the demons of hell. In fact, he might have ascended past that. He punched him in the face. Oh my gosh, is life even worth living now? No, it has to be, because the Joestars are the goodest of good boys. I've seen it. And then Dio will go, huh? He goes, huh? What does he mean by huh? I can't believe he took that hit to the face like he did. If he's not dead, then I'm the Queen's Queen Beans, chicken nugget beans. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please die and stop talking. So that's my opinion of Speedwagon.
Very, very original, because he's probably besides Dio the most popular character from part 1.
Why?
Because people love him. And I personally, I just love his introduction so much that it carries him for the rest of the part.
He has a good introduction.
Yeah, where it's like, Jonathan, we're gonna rob you. Wait, you didn't kill my friend? Okay, you're my friend now.
No, and then he becomes the biggest fangirl of the Joestars, like when Jonathan's dad died. Jonathan's dad is great. I don't think probably no one ever talks about him. That dude is a champ and the goodest boy. Or like freaking Dio's dad like stole his wife's whatever, and he's like, well, this man saved me, and if he did steal my ring, he probably had a good reason, and he was probably in a bad situation. Here, take the ring and pay it forward. So and then so I was on Team Speedwagon. He's like, the Joestars are the kings of men themselves. God should bow before them. They're so kind and good-hearted. Wait, but he's dying. But you know what? Jonathan carries on that spirit. We shouldn't be weeping. It's the future in the hands of Jonathan and his dog. So I'm like, I get it, Speedwagon. They're cool guys. But he didn't stop, and I need him to stop.
Well, he dies at the end of part 2.
Thank goodness.
Hey, he dies bachelor, having made the Speedwagon Foundation, which I don't know if you've caught on to that. The Speedwagon Foundation is kind of the money magic explanation whenever the Joestars need anything.
Oh, well, it's a good idea, and I love what the fan community I saw is that Speedwagon has the strongest stand, which is the Speedwagon Foundation.
Yes, that he has a stand that the fans have dubbed "I Can't Stop Loving You." Yeah, because it will forever support Jonathan. It's super sweet as an idea.
Yeah, no, I love the Speedwagon Foundation. Anytime they're just because I think that's just fun in like spy movies or things, or where there's rich characters involved, where it's just like, or poor characters who have rich ties, where it's just like, oh man, we need like $1 million. Well, don't worry, I'll call my friend. And then like one of the characters like, you have a friend who can just give you $1 million.
It's like, shit, we need a submarine. Don't worry, Polnareff, the Speedwagon.
Yeah, the Speedwagon Foundation will fix it.
Okay. But yeah, Speedwagon is generally very popular. And I think for a lot of people, it is really just that introduction and that bond with Jonathan, to the point where, I don't know, I guess I personally never was that bothered by his narration. Although, it is undeniable. He really is just sort of the fighting game commentator for everything that happens.
Yeah, maybe if I was, I like Jonathan, But maybe if I liked Jonathan as much as Speedwagon, like we'd be in it together, you know?
Maybe.
Like I'd be cheering alongside him. I'd be like, yeah, dude, like that was pretty sick. I'd be like, tell me about it. I want to know. I saw it once, but I want to feel it again. But yeah, no, I mean, all joking aside, I don't hate Speedwagon, but I don't like Speedwagon.
That's fair enough. That is fair enough.
I do like his hat. His hat's very cool. I like that it's a deadly machine. And I do like, and I agree with you. I like his introduction. I just think after the fact, when he appeared in part 2, I was very, very sad. and when at the very end, they were like, "Here's where everyone went." I literally had my fingers crossed, like, "Speedwagon's dead, and Speedwagon's dead," and they were like, "And Speedwagon died." I'm like, "Yes! Oh, thank the Joe stars. He won't be talking anymore."
Oh, come on. He's not that bad in part 2, though, is he?
No question mark.
Is he? Wait, is he even? What is he even present for? In part 2, he's present for like the final fight, right? And that's it.
Actually, he is kind of bad because he's with the Nazi section where he's like, "You can't do that. He's a demon among demons, a Nazi demon, just like you Nazi man demon." And they're like, "Bro, like he's like not even a Nazi man demon. I'm a Nazi man demon." Like, "You don't even know that. How did he hear us? We're in the room. But that must mean if that means this, then what?" I'm like, "Oh no, what's happening again?" Joseph, save me.
He will. But first, we have to wrap up part 1. So, okay, we got the first 3 episodes down. Dio's a vampire. They have the fight at the mansion, and sort of part 1. What do you think in terms of like fights and like action with like Hamon and everything?
Hamon is fine. It's basically just and if I'm understanding it properly, I'm sure there's more nuance to it, but the way it's mostly used in fights seems to be you either apply Hamon to make it like stronger or like so you can grab it, that kind of stuff, or you use it to basically kind of almost create like kinetic energy, like kinetic force. And that either gives you like strength or it pushes things faster. So it's just like you're just imbuing energy into things and it can do kind of whatever you want it to. Not in like it can transform or whatever, which maybe I'm misremembering, but it usually just seems to be like apply speed, apply force, apply defense, that kind of stuff. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, what Hamon also can do is it can sort of change your body and make it more flexible. But the anime, I think, cuts out most of the attacks that involve that. So you're forgiven for not remembering that. Because I don't know, do they even do the zoom punch in the anime? Do you remember?
I do not remember, but I don't know if that's I don't know if maybe I just forgot it.
Because the zoom punch is where Jonathan and Zeppeli dislocate all of their bones in their arm to sort of stretch their arm and have further reach with Hamon.
Oh, that sounds awesome, but I don't remember that.
Okay, I think they do it maybe once, but it might be sort of a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, like Hamon in general, like it was just fine. It was just like we have energy powers now, pretty cool. I liked the way he explained it, where he's like, "I'm gonna murder this frog. Haha, joke's on you. I didn't even touch the frog. I broke the brick beneath it." And that was cool. That was like a cool visualization. Like it's just it was fine. It did what it needed to do.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the breathing aspect and that it's kind of like sunlight where I don't know if it's just Joseph who has it, but does Jonathan also have like the sunset overdrive punch or whatever?
Yes, he has the overdrive attacks as well. He only uses each of them, I think, once, but he does have like 5 of them.
Yeah, like which is cool. Like I like that kind of stuff because it just looks good. Like I like the energy effect where it doesn't just look like Super Saiyan glow. Like it has kind of little, if I'm remembering correctly, it's kind of like little sparkles in it, like it's sunlight. Like it's refracting and stuff. So I think just in general, like Hamon, it did its job. It's cool. But as far as the fights go, nothing stood out to me too much that I can think of. I think the best fight would have to be in the mansion, where they're like falling and they're doing, he's like he positions him over the little statue or whatever. And they're really invested there. And then obviously, I would say the final fight with Dio and Jonathan is pretty good. Barring Speedwagon. So,
yes.
But yeah, no, like the fights were just kind of fine. Like they had the typical kind of shonen thing of like maybe not typical for the time, but yeah, the thing of like the noble warrior who is just like, I won't, you let me attack you, but why? Well, I knew you were good at heart and you wouldn't kill me. It's like, whoa, you're so cool, I'll let you kill me, that kind of thing. And then and then you have the other guy who's just like, I don't care, I just want to fight, baby. You kind of have that duality.
Yeah, fine. And I think it's very good that you bring up sort of the time, because obviously Phantom Blood is at this point 35 years old as a story. And so it's also sort of interesting to sort of think about the ecosystem it was made in, right?
Yeah.
It's very clearly kind of a ripoff of Fist of the North Star in terms of sort of the style and the appeal of it. Especially the manga really feels like Fist of the North Star, but drawn slightly worse.
Okay.
Part 1's art is really rough. The anime really changes the art style quite a bit.
I would imagine Araki didn't have his Jojo style defined by part 1, so.
Oh, he still hasn't defined it. Like, it constantly changes.
Yeah.
To give you an example, part 4, in the manga, the first chapter of part 4 looks like part 3. But then the final chapter of part 4 looks like the anime of part 4. And that transition happens like very incrementally, where Josuke goes from just Jotaro with different hair to, the very effeminate looking character from the anime. And then, you get Giorno and Jolene and all the other characters looking more and more sort of thin and female. Whereas, part 1 and 2 and 3 especially are kind of like, oh yeah, this is just a refrigerator with a head on top of it.
Yeah.
This is my character.
And he's 15.
Yes, he's 15. Because Jonathan and Dio are 22 when Phantom Blood happens, if I remember correctly.
That more or less checks out for me.
Yeah. Okay, so we got sort of the main fights and everything happening. What do you think of Zeppeli and sort of his presence in part 1?
I feel like he's the same as Haman, where I'm just kind of like, you're fine. Like, I like your silly hat. I kind of like I always like these types of training things that are just so ludicrous, where it's like, carry this cup of coffee and don't let a single drop touch air. Like, I don't know. So he has the little mission where it's like, take the wine glass and, go defeat this guy. So I kind of like that aspect of him and how he was very upfront about like the stakes and the danger. I like his sacrifice. I like his little backstory where like he knew this was coming, but he was like, that's fine. It's for the greater good. Didn't he have a family that he left behind too?
Yes. Well, that's I mean, that's the whole thing, because in part 2 you got his grandson, right?
Yes. Caesar. Yeah, that's right. So
one anecdote to that is that when the chapter originally came out, he actually says, Jonathan, you're like the son I never had. And then by the time part 2 rolled around, Araki had to fix that, go back to the volumes and change it, because he realized, that doesn't work.
Well, that's funny. Well, I'm glad he changed it at least. Instead of just being like, he was joking. Anyway, but yeah, no, Zeppeli is fine. Like, I like him more than Speedwagon, which is much of a compliment to him. So I'll say I like him more than I like on the totem pole. I would say it's like Jonathan, Dio, Zeppeli, everybody else.
I mean,
but he's good. Like, he's doing his thing. When he died, I was like, oh, what a cool guy.
Yeah, so, and enhanced by the whole the way sort of the ending song ties into that moment when he does the sacrifice, right? Where you sort of get the slow first notes of Roundabout playing.
Yeah, he was good. So I don't have strong feelings on him, but he was good. So
all right. So what do you think of the ending of part 1?
I really, really, really like it. I think that's where it hit the highs of the first 3 episodes again. Because especially with just like how petty Dio is, that he's still ahead and he's like, I'm going to ruin your boat marriage and kill everybody and turn them into zombies. This will be really fun. And I got my little gremlin boy to help me. The fact that he like designed a coffin with laser beams or something like that. Or, like, he has laser beams and he's got like vein attacks that he can attack you with. I just thought the vibe of it was really good, and I especially my favorite part, and what I think makes Jonathan just a good character. It's not just like, oh, he's okay. No, he's a good character. He's a good boy. Is when he his way of defeating Dio is that he's just gonna hold him and die with his brother because he's still, he still lived with him all that time, so there is still some amount of care. And I thought that was really good, and I thought the ending was cool. I liked the big explosion, and I liked the also just again what makes Jonathan a good boy is he's like, well, normally I'd let you die with me and my wife because I would be pretty dope, but you gotta, but haha, joke's on you. You're also a good person, so you have to save that baby. She's like, shit. So, and so they do that, and I'm like, Jonathan's a cool guy. I like him, and I just like the imagery of like the coffin floating in the ocean. So obviously I knew Dio was going to come back, but I liked that as an ending to Jonathan's story, and regardless, he did succeed in the long term. Even if he didn't end up defeating him there, he protected the world for like 100 years, and then also set it up so that he could be defeated later by weakening his body and all these things. So I liked the ending. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I think I've never met anyone who doesn't like Jonathan's sacrifice because it's so fitting, right? Because he's such a kind and sweet boy, and the way he defeats ultimate evil is to embrace it and just be like, the two of us, as we've always been,
and embrace the part of it that is human, which is that you're my brother. So which is cool. And
like one thing that I've always appreciated, again, sort of about the dub, although I think the sub does it as well. When Dio realizes that Jonathan's dead, you can hear that shock in his voice. It's not just, ugh, the idiot has died. It's like, good God, what if? It brings that feeling of a connection there between the two right at the end. I like that kind of stuff where it's like, literal moments before oblivion, you realize what could have been.
Yeah. No, and those are always, I think, the best moments is when a character contradictions, because we as humans are very contradictory. So to have that idea of like, I literally tried to kill you and I hate you, but you're my brother and I love you. And Dio's like, well, man,
just let me eye laser you in peace.
Yeah, like get in the coffin, you big lug.
Also, an interesting thing, because you mentioned his little gremlin, Wei Feng. So he actually has a much bigger role in the manga, in that he's a fortune teller that basically foretells that Dio is going to be a massive fucking problem.
Yeah.
Because I think in the anime they have it as well, where he says, "Oh, Dio has like the 3 moles on his ear that make him it's sort of the mark of the devil, and make him prone to being like this." And so it's always funny how in the anime, the guy who basically like tells Dio of his fate is just like a random vampire friend that he has at one point, and like wheelchairs him around
in his Futurama head jar. Feeds him
exactly. Well, he literally also wheelchairs him around after the mansion burns down, and Dio goes to like charm Jack the Ripper because he's in a wheelchair, and you just see Wei Fang in the background just wheeling him in, like,
let's
Jack
go, buddy.
the Ripper. Yeah.
Oh, Jack. Yeah, Dio's great. But yeah, that is funny. But yeah, did you have any other points on part 1, or can I bring my other hot take about part 1?
Well, I just want to give you like sort of the background, sort of how it was made, I guess.
Yeah,
just so you have a little more context. So Araki is one of the few people, and this is a hot take, I don't think many people would agree with me. I think Araki is one of the few true artists that I know sort of within my lifetime, in that he is someone who will prioritize his creative expression and sort of what he wants to like do creatively above anything else. If he wants to write a vampire story today, that's what you're getting, and he doesn't care if something is like a little weirdly paced or something doesn't line up properly. He just wants to tell you about vampires, or he learned today that if you freeze blood, this happens to it, so he wants to write a fight about that. And so a lot of his writing is very vibe based. Case in point, part 1 happened because he decided he wanted a Victorian story, and he wanted sort of an English character to inhabit it, but he couldn't come up with a main character. So he realized, oh, the restaurant I eat at every like week with my editor is called Jonathan's. Aha! And so he just made Jonathan.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, but just Jonathan. People have 2 names usually. Jonathan Joestar. That's an English cool name. Let's go with it. And what's the series called? Jonathan Joestar, Jojo. So yeah, it was very much sort of just he wanted to tell a simple story about vampires, but he did it in his own sort of I do what I want kind of way. No,
that's awesome. I always love that creative process idea. And I think that but I think what also makes him admirable is I know there's all the memes of like Iraqi forgot or whatever. And so I was expecting when I got to jumping a little ahead, but I won't focus on it too long. But with like part 3, when we introduced stands, I was expecting like them to just like not mention Haman, but I'm like, but Joseph still uses it. So he didn't forget. He still has it. It's just not as useful.
I mean, the whole Araki forgets thing is it's kind of like Horikoshi forgot the traitor in that it's mostly very baseless. There are some instances where he genuinely just forgot. But most of the time he goes back and fixes them either for the volume or the anime.
Right. It's more so in reference to like big things where it's like even an idiot could have caught that, but Araki forgot. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, like if he doesn't want to break, like there are things later on where like the story does take weird turns and it seems like it's omitting something. It usually has a reason. Like part 5 has that, where there's a big controversial plot element where people are like, oh, Araki forgot about this thing, but the reality is no, he was just depressed and realized that he didn't want to follow up on this plot twist because he thought it would make him more depressed because he liked his characters.
Yeah, so, it's really cool. I like that. And I think as long as you can keep it entertaining, like that's what art's about.
Exactly.
To me anyway, is seeing like a world and to me, art is all about like creating worlds and characters that you get to like people and places that you can't actually go or actually meet, but you get like the best version of it from that. You get to learn about that person through it. So like I got to go to this bizarre, weird world of the JoJo world, and it didn't feel like, oh, well, but this was just here because XYZ. It feels like it's coming from a person and you get to experience a piece of them. So that's fun.
Yeah, but so what's your hot take about part 1?
I think Dio is way more entertaining as just a rude rich boy than when he becomes a vampire.
I mean, I don't even know if that's a hot take. I think there are quite a few people who continuously prefer Dio less the further they get into the story.
Good, because that's how I felt in part 1, was that once he became a vampire, I understand that it's kind of like an extension of like all power and all these things, but the way he acts about it does not like, there's not a moment where I can point to and be like, this was an example of that, and that is a fun scene. It's more of like, if you think about it, you're like, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, sure, that's what it is. But there's not like a scene or a moment where I'm like, oh, wow, he said this line before, and now he's reframed it as a vampire, and that means something to me in my brain. So I was just kind of like, yeah, he's a vampire boy. He wants to kill and suck and rule. So like to me, I just thought he was less interesting, but the voice acting carried him. So
yeah.
And then the ending was good. The ending brought it back around.
Yeah, I think with Dio, it's sort of like he's a character that very often sort of gets by on sort of the bizarreness of his presence. He has funny lines like, "Oh, how many breads have you eaten in your life?" Things like that.
His rule of cool.
Yeah, but he gets very little in terms of characterization that sort of ties him together. Which actually, and you may be interested to know this, there are some people who, when they talk about JoJo, they specify which Dio they're talking about, as in part 1 Dio, part 3 Dio, and then all the other versions of him that sort of spring up across the parts, because he is genuinely characterized quite differently depending on where he pops up.
Well, thankfully he has centuries to allow for that. So.
yeah, and to me, it's sort of one of those things where it's like, because we tend to see very little of him, considering sort of who he is to the story. The fact that a lot of it is contradictory has always made him more interesting to me. Where it's sort of like, okay, but how can this fit together?
Yeah, I agree.
You have poverty Dio in part 1. You have God complex Dio in part 3, and you have got other stuff coming down the line. And it's sort of like, how do you connect them, and how do you make up a version of the story where there is that sort of through line?
Yeah.
And I mean, one could be reductive and say, you know, the fans have to do the characterization Araki didn't. But I think that's sort of where that Arakiism, sort of that personal note of JoJo comes in, where it's like, I don't think Araki just forgot about characterizing Dio. He wanted Dio to be a specific thing at specific points in time, and that's just sort of what he did. And then it's up to me to sort of find the rest. And I appreciate that.
Well, and to, you know, because I literally just made a statement that would be kind of similar to that, which would be the idea of like, I don't think I think you have to fill in the blanks on your own for Vampire Dio to connect him to previous Dio in a way that's engaging for me. But as far as like the way he changes from part 1 to part 3, I agree with you, because I think that one detail of he was underwater for 100 years, just there you go. He could be whatever he wants now.
Yeah.
And so if more time passes, or he dies at the end of part 3, but obviously I know he's another thing. So if whatever reasons he comes back, then I don't think there's any reason to expect Dio to have to be consistent, because he is a character who is literally like jumping between points and times and stewing on his hatred, or all these different things. So I just think that Araki had a framing device that allowed for it. Because I do think there would be it would be weird if it was a continuous story in terms of like one year is, let's say it's about one JoJo, and instead of skipping 2 generations or however long, it's just like the next year we see Dio and he's completely changed. It's like, well, then it would kind of feel a bit weird. It's like, well, how do we get here? But 100 years is 100 years, and dying is dying.
That, and also a lot of Dio's versions that you sort of see about, either they're separated by time or they're separated by narrator, because going forward in the story, you hear a lot of people's sort of experiences with Dio and sort of how they encountered him, and that's how he's sort of retroactively characterized. And so it's sort of, you have that additional barrier where it's like, okay, he acted a certain way towards like Jotaro and Jonathan, but how did he act towards a friend, like someone he trusted, for example, and stuff like that. So I think Dio is one of those perfect examples of just how Araki approaches storytelling, where it's just like, this is what we're doing now, deal with it.
I think he does the due diligence to not just I guess insult your intelligence for it. I think he gives reasons, but I think he is, like you said, he is dedicated. But what makes it good is he doesn't spend time trying to explain it to you. He gives a reason that is inherent to implicit to the character, and you got to deal with it. But he is not so dismissive of you as a reader to be like, you liked Tommen before? Joseph doesn't even know what that is in part 3. Fuck you. Like, like he still has it. I'm just not going to do it as much. So there you go. So it's good. But I think that's everything I have about part 1, unless you have any more things you wanted to bring up.
No, I mean, part 1 is very much the sort of fan reception wise, it's considered the first one, and that's kind of it. Like, it's just what you have to sort of get through to, well, not have to, what you should get through in order to sort of understand the story, but it's not something many people return to. Because my hot take is that part 1 is the weakest JoJo part. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, we'll see. We'll see how as they discuss.
Okay.
For the most part, I think so, yes. Because it's just kind of like 3 episodes of really good, and then kind of just mid, and then like a pretty good ending, or a really good ending,
Yeah.
And so, but it's also like short and sweet, so I don't know if that might, have something to do with it. But overall, it doesn't reach for the highs of the other series, and I think that's what ultimately allows it to be the weakest. Is that its lows I don't think are as lows as some of the lows I'll bring up later, but I think its highs aren't allowed to be as highs as the parts later that I might think have worse lows. So therefore, it's just the weakest.
I think it's the one that sort of, as you said, its pendulum doesn't swing very strongly either way. Like, it doesn't have a lot of substance. It's not bad. It's not great. It's fine. It's fun. It's a fun time. There are
good boy.
There are absolutely worse ways to spend 9 episodes.
Absolutely. So, but yeah. All right, then are we moving on to part 2?
Yes, part 2, sort of general impressions and thoughts.
So Joseph is the best Joestar. He's my boy. I love him, and he is perfect. Every single scene is enhanced by him existing and talking and being funny, and his English voice actor is great. He put grenades on a guy and it failed, and then his response was, they were like, you have a plan now, right? He's like, well, obviously I have a plan. As you can see, his legs are really destroyed and disheveled, but my legs are in perfect condition, which means, and then he runs, and I'm like, he's 10 out of 10. He's a perfect character. He's the greatest I've ever seen. He's amazing. The part 2 is the Joseph story, and everything else is there to service him being the coolest guy who ever existed. So I really like part 2. I don't love all the like certain aspects that are just kind of like, oh, it takes a little bit for things to get going at certain points, like the whole Nazi section with Speedwagon and the, and the guy trying to like get the pillar man and then explain that and blah 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 blah. Anytime that Joseph is not on screen, I am unhappy, but he is on screen for 90% of the time, so it's a good time.
Yes. You will be happy to find that you are not alone in this sentiment among
I
the
assume
community.
not.
Well, actually, it is a little more complicated because Joseph is everyone's favorite Jojo the first time they watch the series. But my experience with like people I've gotten into the series and people I've talked to is that the more sort of you revisit Jojo, the more you start liking other Joestars and sort of move away from Joseph. And my pet theory about that is that Joseph is a fun character. I think that's undeniable, right? I'm sure you won't try to deny it. But I think he really benefits from the fact that he follows part 1, which, as we said, is fine, but it has very little about it that sort of sticks out and screams at you in terms of how good it is. And you have Jonathan, who, while he's a good boy, quite a few people consider him a bit bland. Yeah. So you go from that to Joseph, fucking shooting someone with a Coca-Cola bottle.
Yeah.
And pulling out a machine gun.
And then at the very end going, oh, I lost my temper. Granny's going to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that enhances him quite a bit to the point where he gets and not to say an easy in, but he does get sort of a very quick favorite spot for a lot of people the first time around. Well, it was the same for me as well.
Well, I'll say this. I love all of the Joestars, even Jonathan. I think to an extent I have like a light, like, ooh, big kiss on the cheek. I love you. But I love all the Joestars, and I think that as we keep going, I'll talk about why. But Joseph has not wavered at all in my mind as far as the spot, because I think what makes him so good isn't just like his energy, but it is like, to me, the absurd dorky charm of how he goes about it that I think is just leagues above anything else in the series that I've watched in terms of just charisma. And that might also be the voice acting. But I think his gimmick, for example, of, you're about to say, Joseph, how did you pull this off? Joseph, how did you pull this off? Never gets old. That is always entertaining and endearing. But I think the best part about him is that he is the perfect character to have Haman. Because like I said, for him, Haman isn't like the power he's using. It's just an excuse for his harebrained schemes to like somewhat work in reality. Which I think is what makes him really cool, is that you put him up against the Pillar Men or whatever, and Araki has to constantly come up with clever solutions for how he's able to get out of these things. And each time, if there's just that one little bit that would scale believability, you just say, he put Haman into it. It's like, okay, then we're good. We did it. And so like all of that, like the fact that he just like brought a Tommy gun to like that little bar or whatever and just shot that guy and didn't explain anything. And then he gets back up. He's like, I also put grenades on your back. He's like, motherfucker, I was talking. Ah! And then he explodes. And he's like, well, I blew up his legs, so now I'm running. And then, he tries to bluff his way through things. So I think overall, his it's not just that he contrasts Jonathan for me. It's just also that he is the archetype that I like, which is just like, it's like that Jackie Chan vibe that they always talk about, where like in the fights with Jackie Chan, he always looks like he's one step away from dying, but which is what makes you, even though he's going to win in the end and he's like a badass fighter, that he has to think 24/7, like, okay, I have to burn my hand here in order to set up this rope around this one guy and get stabbed 60 billion times on top of the spike pit, so that I can then look at the Pillar Man and go, hoo, you thought my plan was this, but you're a big dingus. And then they die. And then he goes, now I'm going to go date a maid. So, and And ultimately, that was the part that solidified him to me as being a cool guy. As I love always the thing in stories where like there'll be like a side character or like a side thing where it's like if that story just continued to play out, that would be kind of sad. But obviously, it's not the main story, so you just kind of allow it to happen. So when that maid girl gets like possessed or whatever, and then like he comes in at the end and she's like, they're like, oh, we saved her. Now we're going to go fight the Pillarmen. And it's like, oh, well, that sucks for that girl that she's like disfigured now on her face. And like, I guess she felt really bad and shitty. And then he's like, hey, girl, remember that date? You know, fix yourself up, doll face. We're going to go on a date when I get back. And then they just get married.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
and they crash his own funeral.
Yeah, they crash his own funeral. And he's like, babe, did I not tell you to telegram them that I was alive? She's like, oh, whoopsie. He's like, I'll kill you. He's like, oh, honey. And then she's chasing him around the car. So no, I'll let you know if at any point the Joseph love fades. But I've watched like 100 episodes of Jojo now, and it has not faded one bit. I love him more every day. So.
All right, excellent. Yeah, because I think I've had sort of an up and down relationship with Joseph. I really liked him when I first watched it. Then I really didn't like him for a while because I thought, oh, you know, what does he have besides being cool? And now I like him again because my guy, he's cool.
Well, he's funny too. Like he's just a funny boy. He's also a good boy too. So he's got the good boy traits. I mean, the very first thing he does is literally save a black kid from police brutality.
Yeah.
and then gives him the wallet, and then he's just like, "You're my friend for the rest of your life now, and you can be rich, so let's hang out." Like, and I'm just like, what a cool guy.
yes. But okay, so we got Joseph covered. But what do you think of the actual plot of part 2?
I think the plot of part 2, it does its job well, which is that it is literally just setting up a bunch of boss fights for Joseph to be funny at. But also, like, I think the Pillarmen are just a cool concept. Like, I like the way that they can just, like, bend and contort their bodies. I'm generally, like, a fan of, like, the ancient evil archetype of, like, we were, like, gods of our era, and then we come to the new era, and we're like, whoa, these crafty bastards, you know, that kind of thing, and they want to become gods. Like, I think for most people, they don't like that because it's overplayed, but I just generally think it's cool. I like the idea of, like, a god rising basically from the dead from a previous era, and then the new generation has to like prove why they're wimps and losers. So that's a cool idea. I think you have the better extension of the honorable warrior type, with the one guy who puts the little ring inside Joseph, which was also I think a very good idea because for the most part, I think it could have got to the point of like, okay, sure, we're training. We want to save the world or whatever because I live here. Okay, nice. But like putting those little rings inside Joseph gave a personal reason because I want Joseph to keep being a funny man, and he can't do that if he's dead. So,
yes.
so I thought that worked out really well. So generally, the story of just, I mean, it very much feels just like a classic shonen story, like, you know, your Saint Beasts or whatever in Yu Yu Hakusho, where we go to a place and we got to fight 4 guys and they want to destroy Demon Land or whatever. These three or 4 guys that came back to life, they're creepy weirdos, and we have to beat them for the sake of the world. I thought it worked. So
yeah, because what did I want to say? Fuck, I forgot.
Sorry, I talked forever. I went MHA on you.
it's all good. I just but yeah, no, I think what makes sort of the plot of part 2 fun is sort of you have that road movie feel to it. That's always how I've looked at it, where it's like, today we're here, today we're in Rome, today we're in Venice, today we're in Switzerland, and oh no, final battle in Switzerland, which I do appreciate. You know, we are a non-canon country, so it is always fun when an author...
It's always nice when Araki was like, you know what, Oceaniz, I'm going to make you feel validated. I will try to destroy your place for once. Yes. Like, thank you. No one ever does.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was very cool of him to do for me specifically, 15 years before I was born. That was really cool of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, what I wanted to say about sort of, because you mentioned sort of it is very shonen-y, one thing that you might be interested in is the fact that Lisa is generally considered among the first, if not the first, female fighter in Shonen Jump.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, which is, I can't confirm it because there's been a lot of series in Shonen Jump and how you define that is sort of iffy, but it's one of those factoids that comes up a lot and that has reasonable credibility based on the time span that part 2 was written in. And it is
Lisa's cool.
Yeah, she's cool, and I really like sort of how that kickstarts Araki's love for strong women, which sort of takes a backseat again in part 3 because part 3 is the testosterone part.
Yeah, it's the boys.
Yeah, it's the boys. But then in part 4 already you have some more, and then part 5 you have a little less again because it's testosterone part 2, and then part 6 is just like, you know what, all female cast, baby.
Yeah, which I'm very excited for.
Yes.
Because like I said, I watched episode 1 of that, and I was like, I already like Jolene. They gave her a full backstory. This is great.
Yeah.
So that's for later.
Yeah. So part 2 is still, in my opinion, like part 1. It feels like Araki's still trying to figure the plot part of things out. And what's also interesting is that this is a part that Araki, because it was the first time he did like a next part for Jojo, this was something that he was very nervous about, which you can see in the fact that Joseph, if he's not talking, he kind of just looks like Jonathan with a different hairstyle. And that is very much by design. Like, Araki specifically wanted to make sure that readers could look at like the cover and know this is still Jojo.
Yeah.
And he regrets that. He's talked a lot about how he would now make Joseph look a lot different. Just give him different clothes and a different sort of facial structure. But in his typical Araki fashion, he also just kind of goes, "It is what it is. I made him like this." And
I think the anime helped because I didn't see too much of Joseph and his like nose or his his nose specifically. I think is very different from Jonathan.
Yeah, because in the manga they are almost indistinguishable visually.
Yeah. No, I can tell them apart instantly in the anime at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's also the reason why Joseph is the only other Jojo who still has the Joestar in the name. Whereas, then you have Jotaro Kujo and Josuke Higashikata, where the Higashikata is a Jo in Japanese. It progressively gets more creative with the JoJo part of things. And Joseph is the only one where it's still, Joseph Joestar, specifically for the sake of making sure that readers at the time didn't just think this was a new manga. Which actually, also anecdote, that happened with part 7, where part 7 was not explicitly announced to be a JoJo part. And for the first couple of chapters, it has no references to JoJo stuff at all. And so it took, I think, 7 or 8 weeks until someone asked Araki, a reader, sort of, so is this what happened to JoJo? Why are you doing this other part? And he's like, what do you mean? This is JoJo part 7.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's fun though.
Yeah. So there was sort of that anxiety of trying to do something different, but alienating your reader base, which obviously Araki got over, as you've certainly seen sort of with how different part 3 and then part 4 are to part 1. He wasn't riding on part 1 anymore after that.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as, or were you done with that?
Yeah, I'm done with that.
With Lisa, I will say that I think she has pretty much everything going for her, except for the classic shonen trope of all right, now the female character is going to fight a really, really strong cool guy.
Oh yeah.
And then the really strong cool guy goes, "Ha, I tricked you." And we're supposed to go, "No, he tricked the character. That's good enough, I guess." I didn't enjoy that. I at least wanted a back and forth before he did something shady. But that was unfortunate. I was very excited. I was like, all right, obviously Joseph's gonna beat this guy. But I was like, oh man, she's really gonna get a fight and lose, obviously, because Joseph is ends up being her son, and this would be a passing of the torch or whatever. But no, she just starts the fight and she's like, bam! And he's like, it's a clone, idiot. You're dead. Mm-hmm. But I think Lisa, other than that, has everything else going for her because she has that stoicism that's really enjoyable. The first thing she does is walk on water and do some cool flip and put a thing on Joseph or whatever, the little gas mask or whatever.
Yeah.
So she has a very strong presence, and it also, I think, Araki kind of gets to have a fun little cake and eat it too, where it's ooh, she's so sexy, and Joseph is your insert who's like, ooh, she's so sexy, but also I hate her because she's a bitch and I'm gonna beat her up. Oh shit, she's my mom. Well, now both of those things can't happen.
I especially love when you go back to sort of that ending montage where like the narrator is saying, oh, Speedwagon is dead. And then you see like him talking about Joseph was informed about Lisa's relationship to him. And in that panel, Joseph's face is just like sheer horror. I know.
What have I thought about this woman?
He looks so like displeased about it.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, no.
Good. Yeah, so I think she has enough. I think what he does get right is obviously there's just a lot of I think there's a lot of nuance to her, like when she cries over Caesar. She has, I don't know, she's very good. Literally the only disappointing thing was just I thought I wanted her to get an actual fight.
Yeah.
Womp womp, but I'll get over it. And then as far as that's pretty much it for. The last thing about Lisa. This is what I was thinking of. She also has a kind of a presence to her in the fact that we learn, she was the baby from part 1, which I thought was going to end up actually. Maybe they said it was a girl at the time, but I just thought, that's going to be Joseph, and that's kind of I thought, maybe that's a cool idea, is that it's not actually a blood tie to Jonathan that creates the Joestars. It's actually a chosen child or whatever. But the fact that kid did come back and was Lisa, which then does tie her into the Joestar family regardless, is cool. I like that a lot. So that was good. I don't know if this is better portrayed in the manga or if I'm fine accepting this just as the weird thing it is, but I love that they had the whole story about there was like a soldier who was like one of Dio's demons in the army, and like when they reveal he's a demon, he just looks like a demon and acts like a demon and doesn't seem to be able to talk. So I'm like, how did he trick everybody?
There's a lot of that. Don't worry. That's something that Jojo sort of does and never mentions. Like in part 6, there's a lot. Yeah, in part 6, there's a lot of people who just don't look human, and no one mentions it ever. And it's just like, okay, like, I don't know if you remember, because you watched the first episode, part 6.
The lawyer guy.
Jolene, the lawyer with the elf ears.
I thought, we're getting off track, but it's just for this one tangent. I thought that what was going to end up being the case is that, okay, now that we've befriended Alien Boy, at the very end, it's going to be like, or like in some like side thing, it's just going to be like you start seeing more alien looking weirdos. It's like, he came to Earth and we were cool with him. And so he told the mothership, bring everybody else. And now there's just aliens on the planet because he has elf ears. So.
Yeah, well, you just accurately recreated a fan theory. Because ever since part 4, there's a suspicious amount of alien-looking people in JoJo, and no one ever mentions it.
That's my headcanon.
Yeah. Araki never talks about it, but it is a very common fan theory that at some point aliens just became part of the world. And it's just not worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think that stuff is good. I love stuff like that in stories where it's just like, that, like, it's all a fine line, but there are some things that I enjoy of just it is what it is, and that's either the joke or XYZ. And I think it all depends on tone. Like the tone of that backstory is supposed to be like overly like sad and tragic, but not like sad in the way that you're supposed to be crying, but in like, man, that really sucks for her that demon guy just cosplayed as a dude and got her husband killed. It's over the top in that way. So I think if your tone matches, I can accept that stuff way more. That bizarreness. So, but yeah. So Lisa, that's all I got for her. I guess if you wanted, we could talk about Caesar.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. What do you think about Caesarino?
I like him a lot. He's a cool boy, and his I think he has one of the coolest uses of Haman, which is when he has all of the bubble. He uses bubble beam, and then it's like, haha, fool, those are bubbles. And then he's like, guess what light does to bubbles, bitch? And then boom, it's like a laser light show that cuts him in half. I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever. So I loved that. I really liked his backstory. Like usually when it's like, we just insert the backstory right before a character dies, it can feel like obnoxious. But I thought it was good because we kept setting up like his kind of like drama and his deal. So like whenever we got the reveal of it, which led to his death, it had a good tragedy because it was like, Caesar, you need to go and he, obviously that guy didn't know it was his son at the time, but like you need to do this, you need to help protect things. But then his own pride and ego and love for his own family ended up killing him, and that's the end of that family, right? The
Zeppelis.
Yeah, the Zeppelis. So it has like a really tragic end to it. They actually kept him dead, which was really cool. I didn't expect him to come back because that was a really on the nose cross shaped piece of debris. So I'm like, I think he's dead, which I was happy about. And I thought it made it added even more to Joseph in the fact that he still was willing to give the guy who killed him a fair fight, because he felt like that was what he was due in terms of treating this as like a warrior's game, which I thought was also admirable of him. But Caesar in general, is just a cool guy. I like that. I prefer him as a Speedwagon-esque character, where once he decides he likes Jonathan, he really likes Jonathan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joseph.
Joseph, yeah.
And I thought he was really good. I thought his death was really good. I like that it kind of came at his own hand, of just like he was just blocking the light for a split second, and that was all that guy needed. So it was just really tragic. He was a good character. He also, I believe, unless I'm misremembering, for me, I think him and Joseph, their first encounter, I think is the most bizarre fight in the series, which is, I am going to make out with this lady and flex on you. And then meanwhile, Joseph is like, I am going to kick your ass, even if you're kissing a lady. I don't care. And then his threat at the beginning is, I bet a bird could beat you. And the way this fight ends is that he takes the woman, puts a bunch of Haman into a pigeon, shoves it into her mouth, and that is the KO attack that lets him get the moral victory of a pigeon could beat you. I'm like, that is bizarre. Like, that is, to me, the most bizarre fight, because the context of it is so ridiculous. So, and I love that. That was a great introduction.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think Caesar and Joseph are the kind of sort of couple where it's very traditional in the sense that, oh, I hate you. Oh, we go through hardship. Oh, I love you. But it's just done right. Like, that's really sort of my take on it. I think it's just a formulaic sort of shonen-y friendship, but done very right, to the point where when Caesar does die, it is a genuine sort of, it's a moment. Like, you do feel it, when you have
Lisa
Joseph
cries.
Yeah. She puts the cigarette in her mouth backwards while she's trying to be tough.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Also, about the cross-shaped rock, I sure hope you're not tired of like Bible references.
No, I'll eat them up.
Good, because I don't know if you know this, but Dio is Italian for God.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I wonder where he gets his complex.
Well, you will see. You will see. I suspect you're going to like parts 5 and 6, the way this conversation is going.
Okay. And one last thing I wanted to add to Caesar is one I like that the intro spoils his death by having Jonathan put on the little bandana like at the very end, which is cool.
Yeah.
And I like that Joseph. I like that Joseph uses the bandana to kill the guy who killed Caesar. That was great. That was a great fight too. Because I thought I was going to be really bored with a chariot battle, and I thought as soon as like Joseph's chariot broke, I was like, okay, so it's just going to be a normal fight. But no, then it became just like, we're on the ground and just like, I gotta like move my head to the left and throw some alcohol. I don't know, man. It became like a knockout drag fight. And that guy was really cool. He gouged out his eyes or whatever. But I think the best part about Joseph and Caesar's dynamic, like you said, it just works. But I think the added tinge to it that I haven't really seen too often is that the way Joseph obviously fights is that, like, you have the gag of him like he's playing dead or whatever, and then in the background while the Pillar Man is talking, he's like crawling away, and then he like turns around. It's like a cartoon. He turns around, he stops, and he starts crawling away. So like what I like is that what makes Caesar respect him is that he watches how Joseph fights, which is to play the coward or play the fool, and even have to like manipulate and de-escalate situations. So he doesn't actually respect Joseph because at the end of that fight, Joseph beats the Pillarmen up or like does a sick move. He respects Joseph while he's on his back, taking on like this big bet and this big gamble just to make sure that Caesar could get away. Which I think which made him admire him. So I think that's kind of the difference that I see, is that usually it's like the person, they think they're weak or they think they're a loser, but then they're serious and they step up and they fight and protect them. But instead, it's like he sees the way Joseph fights is way different, and that all these things that I assumed about him because of the way he acts, he actually will use to be protecting and be a good person. So I thought that was great. So I think that's what sells it more.
Okay, good. So I guess sort of the final bit before we move on to the big one. What do you think of Cars as a villain and sort of his final fight?
I like him. I like that he gets an existential death, which is he gets to float through space frozen. It's like, and eventually the existential dread of it all, he just stopped thinking.
Yeah, the spark of thought just extinguished.
Yeah, but I think that Cars is cool. Yeah, he's just, I mean, like I said, he's just kind of like the typical shonen bad guy of like, I want power, I'm better than you, I'm an ancient evil. But I think what just sells him is one, the dub voice acting's really good. And I think like his kind of like Griffin form is really cool. I think the way he's like a sneaky jerk about everything is fun. Doesn't he also get to be the one character who's like, now Joseph, you will say, and then like he uses his like catchphrase against him. So there's a pettiness to him. So I think he just has all the right qualities of like, oh, we need a charismatic bad guy. Here you go. And you watch him and you go, man, Joseph, I really hope you and your friend Nazi boy can put him in the dirt and kill him. So I think that he's just good. He's a I think more so than even Dio in part 1. I was just kind of enjoying my time with this character, just being a scumbag, and which then caused Joseph to have to be creative based on these really petty and cruel situations he would put him in. And I also like that. Am I mistaken? He also fights Cars for the pendant as they're in the ice place, right?
Yes.
And I really like that they actually gave them an encounter early on that was not allowed to be a fight. It had to be kind of like a fun little chase exchange, and that was just kind of cool. Because like in that moment, I kind of thought, oh wait, is there a different guy who's the main bad guy? I was like, wait, is that just was that just like a mook? But I kind of like that now they have like a history. It's not just like, I'm waiting at the top of the summit, come fight me, Joseph. No, he got outsmarted, and so now there's even more like petty anger towards him. So
yeah, it's sort of like it's that scene especially sort of very Indiana Jonesy. It's like, oh, we have to run away from like the avalanche and get the stone, which I always appreciated. Yeah. The one thing with Cars that has always struck out to me is the weird added detail that he like really loves animals and plants. Where like, you know, he specifically dodges midair so he doesn't land on a flower, or he like saves a puppy from being harassed on the street and shit like that. And it's like, I don't think it's ever brought up as like a character trait. It's just a thing he does. Yeah, and I've always really liked that.
Yeah. That's the good line of like, you don't need to then have a backstory of like, when I was alive in the past, I had a really cool lion I liked, and he's dead now. He couldn't be immortal like me. He just likes animals and plants. And that's nice. So
yeah. So I guess we can wrap up part 2 by me telling you that in the new Jojo video game, All-Star Battle, you can not only play as Joseph, but one of his abilities is an insta-dodge where he does the "your next line is," and every single character has a unique dialogue where they say something and go, "What?"
This is in what game?
Yeah. This is an All-Star Battle. It's a remake of an old game or a remaster that just came out on Steam. It's like a fighting game.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, you can look it up on YouTube. Not only does every single like other character in the game have a unique line for this, Joseph has a unique line imitating their voice actors when he does that. All in Japanese though, so no dub, but still, it's super cool.
Mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised you think that's where we got to wrap up, because we haven't talked about the Nazi in the room.
Oh, I keep forgetting that that's a thing in part 2.
The cyborg Nazi.
Yeah, because all things considered, Stroheim doesn't factor into like my liking of the part very much. But yeah, I guess we can talk about him if you have something to say about him specifically.
All I have to say is that I just appreciate that Araki was like, not that we're gonna make you like begrudgingly root for a Nazi, not like him, because he made it. Because this is what I respect about it. It's the very first thing that we get from this Nazi character is literally him going in a room and being like, hey, you're all going to die unless one of you steps up and is the sacrifice. And then someone was like, well, I'll be the sacrifice. He's like, well, that means you're all like weak baby boys. So now you're definitely going to be sacrificed. And you can be like a child soldier or something. All of you die. Like, so like he's bad. Like,
yeah, he's terrible.
Like, that's terrible. And so I appreciate that, that Araki makes this very clear. You're not supposed to like him, but he is going to be on our side to fight this greater evil. And I'm going to give him some cool moments. And you just have to deal with it. Like, you have to deal with him being self-sacrificing enough to like cut off his leg or like blow himself up and then become a weapon for German science or whatever. And you just is a thing. He's going to help us at the very end. He's going to fight. He's going to save the world. He's going to help fight the ultimate evil. And I think what adds comedic value to it, because I don't have anything too crazy to say about him. Just that I think that is an interesting concept. But two, I don't know if this is different in the Japanese, but I love the part where Joseph's like, aside from being a German soldier, he's a pretty cool guy, which is a big besides Joseph.
I didn't even remember that line.
that is almost Naruto levels of he's the coolest guy ever. But he clarified, besides being a war criminal, worst person on the planet, he's kind of cool.
Well, I think for me with Stroheim, what I always like in that it just keeps the character in the story for longer, even after he stops being on screen, is the fact that Joseph's mechanical hand going forward is explicitly designed by him.
him and his besides being a German soldier best buddy.
Yeah, that his because he says because I think he says it in part 2 and then in part 3 he might only say it in the manga, I don't remember, but where he's like, oh yeah, Stroheim hooked me up with some snazzy German science, so now I can use my hand again. And it's like, okay, so this is a beloved character.
Speedwagon not good enough for you, Joseph? Wow. Maybe maybe Speedwagon's not all powerful. You got to get the Germans in here every now and then.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
Got to get the Nazi war crimes in.
Oh god.
But yeah, I thought his inclusion was just like it doesn't, to me it doesn't feel tasteless, which I appreciate. Like even now, like I don't think you could really be too mad at it because he just is what he is. Like he's terrible, but he's gonna help us fight. And besides the Joseph line, which is so absurd that it's hilarious, like at no point do I think you are meant to like him. So or like feel bad for him, or whatever.
So you're not in a camp of people who think that Araki is a Nazi apologist?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, good.
Something about it seems off.
yeah, because when you were talking about how, you're clearly not meant to like him, I was thinking, I wish more people were, as attentive as you are, Ian.
Yeah, to me, it's just the first scene that does it. Like, that was where I'm like, oh, there you go. Because if his first scene was just, we captured Speedwagon, but, eventually we're working with Speedwagon, so that's smoothed over. He wants to fight the ultimate evil, so that's smoothed over. He's friends with Joseph. Like, no, his literal first thing is he kills innocent people.
Yeah, like, I think Araki very intentionally, like, front loads the evilness. So it can remain sort of a thing to keep in mind whenever he does something cool. Because now that I'm sort of remembering it, I think one of the funniest moments in part 2 is in the final fight with Cars, where just a torso of Stroheim just appears out of nowhere. He's like, Jojo, I've come to help you.
And he's like, whoa, that's cool, buddy. And he even he catches him too, because then his legs break or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good way that they defeat Cars, which is I like that, at the end of the day, Joseph is clever, he's smart, but at the end of the day, he's also very lucky. And so I kind of like that luck factor plays in, where he's just like, I don't fucking know. Here's the gem thing, and then that hits it and it causes the explosion or whatever. And then at the very end, I think he kicks him up or whatever. He does something to help finish him off. But I do like that there was that luck factor to it, where it's like his luck has run out, but he's not giving up. He's going to do anything. And in his moment, he's like, I don't know, gem attack. And it works. So we're good. So that was good. And I did think he was gonna die. But yeah. Oh, I guess it does make sense that he sympathizes with the Nazi character, because at the very end he very clearly makes it clear that he does hate the Japanese. So,
Oh yes. Oh god. That whole thing, yeah.
which is only funny because it is written by a Japanese man.
Yes. Yes, he just kicks a Japanese man in the shins.
Yeah, he's like, my stupid daughter married a Japanese man, and now I gotta fly on planes all the time and learn another language. Ugh, I hate the Japanese. It's very funny. So,
but okay, is this our segue into the big boy?
Yeah, let's get into the big boys themselves.
Yeah, the Jojo part. So yeah, part 3, just to give you sort of again a little bit of context, it is by far the most popular and the most publicized part of Jojo. Okay. Mostly due to the fact that for a long time it was the only part of Jojo available outside of Japan and Italy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it's the one you're all seeing and it's your introduction to Jojo, yeah, it's gonna hit.
Yeah, and I think what helped with that is also the fact that it was not just popular but also fairly self-contained. Like, you didn't need to have watched part 1 or 2 to understand that, hey, these big guys have superpowers and they're gonna fight the biggest guy. Like, it's
I guess do you want to talk about that now? The idea of like, can you or can you not skip parts?
Sure. If you have like specific thoughts on it, go for it.
Yeah. Definitely you can skip parts. I literally don't know what people are talking about. I think there's this weird mentality and I have series like this that I know, where people will be like, you have to watch the 40 episodes of something you don't like, so that when you get to the moment where a character goes, hey, it's that thing from earlier, your brain will go like, whoa, I remember that. And that's like an experience that's so, like, how could you take that from someone? That moment where they go, wow, that 40 episodes that I hated, I something from that came back. And in this moment, I get to feel like, whoa, it came back. No, not worth it. So like, so to me, like, for example, with part 2, when I heard that, oh, it's that baby, it's Lisa. The only thing I got was, oh, wow, it's that baby. But if you had just told me that, then instead it would be, oh, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I'll go back to part 1 and get to see that. And so I think that, or if Joseph or whatever, if Joseph just appears and he's just a badass grandpa, then you go, okay, I guess this is just Jotaro's badass grandpa. It doesn't change anything. So to me, I don't, maybe it'll change, but I'm 4 parts in. And at no point have I watched a part and been like, wow, because I watched the parts before this, other than just like comparing the Joestars. That's it. That's the only thing that I think has been enhanced by watching them all, is spending a lot of time with one Joestar, and then you get to the next one, and it's not just, oh, this is an archetype I'm going to get invested in. You go, oh, this is an archetype that's different from these other Joestars. But even then, if you're watching part 1 and you don't like it, and you get to part 3, don't worry, Dio's basically a different guy, so who cares?
Yeah.
So I say skip all the parts you want. And I also think, since we'll get to wrap up Joseph right now, I think watching all the parts in order makes them worse, because Joseph gets butchered.
Oh no.
Because in part 3, he's fine. He's like good. But then in part 4, I'm like, wow, I love Joseph. And then they're just like, he like cheated on his wife and has like some kid out there that he never went and saw. And also he's just like old and hanging out or whatever in a saddle, man. I'm like, what the fuck? I like Joseph because he dated the maid girl and he was just a cool guy. And now he's like some deadbeat asshole. No. So yeah, that's my big hot take on part skipping. Is that unless, you know, maybe for some people those moments of oh, it's that thing from previous really hit. But for me, the whole time I was watching, I was just like, this feels just like, this is just like anything else. This is like if you told someone you have to watch the prequels of Star Wars because they're going to fill in the blanks of whatever, except obviously those came out after the fact. But to me, it's the same impact, which is you get to go, hey, that thing was the Speedwagon. That's like a guy I knew. Whoa. Neat. So my thing is, if you're someone who is like me, never experienced JoJo, if you're not enjoying a part, skip to the next one. And if that one endears you to it or endears you to a thing from the past, then that will hopefully make you go, oh, hey, actually, I do want to see that through because this was a cool concept. So I want to go back and learn about it. But that's my hot take on it. Now, either obliterate me if you want. How do you feel on that?
I used to feel very strongly about that, mostly just because, it was like, oh, just sit down and watch it. It's not that hard. But over the years, I've mostly softened up on that. And my stance on it now is if you really feel like you need to skip parts because you think there's something later on that you may like, and right now you're stuck in the soup where you're just kind of suffering, yeah, skip it. Like I'm not the police. I'm not gonna tell you to. I will implore people generally to have watched all of the parts from 1 to 5 before they watch part 6. Because part 6, I would say, because it is the finale of the saga, you do genuinely need the context of the stuff beforehand, not necessarily to understand the story, but I think to appreciate it.
Okay, that's fair. Like I said, I haven't got to that one, so
yeah. Like if you want to go parts 3, 1, 2, and then 4 or 5, I don't care. I do think 6 should be the last one of the original saga you watch. 5 should probably immediately precede it, because 5 is also like you can't understand it if you haven't watched anything else. You're gonna have a hard time on enjoying it, I think.
Okay.
Because you're not because like the moment to moment stuff is so ingrained in like the previous story, but because there are just a lot of things that part 5 asks you to accept, which if you don't have the context of the previous parts, I don't think you just could just like that. If that makes any sense.
No, that's fair. And I do want to counter my own point. I do think that maybe where this is all coming from is that it is just generally frustrating or just a bit like deflating. I'll say deflating to like have a discussion in the JoJo fandom and then maybe someone be like, oh, I only watched like part 3 and 1. And then it's just like, well, now you're not like, not in a bad way, but you're not at our level in terms of like, you don't know everything. So like talking to you, it's almost like you got to put out the baby gloves and be like, yeah, I guess like Jotaro is cool, but you can't discuss like how he is in another part, and so like if you only watch part 4 and you're just like, whoa, Jotaro is a cool guy. It's like, yeah, he really is. He's a cool guy. I wish you'd watch part 3 so I could talk about more of his cool guy moments, but So I think maybe that's where a lot of it comes from, of like that dismissiveness of the conversation surrounding JoJo, of like, oh, you can just like skip a part and then you can just like hang out and talk to us about JoJo. It's like, well, now you're diluting the conversation by telling people to skip. So that would be my own counter to my own argument. I would say that yes, if you are going to skip, then do people a favor and don't come on being like, I have a definitive opinion on the JoJo franchise. Yeah. Because you don't, and you're just wrong. So yes. But if you just want to experience JoJo in terms of like someone told you about it and they're like, oh, I really want you to get to part 3. That's the part I like, just for entertainment purposes. If you're not enjoying part 1 and 2, skip to 3. Like, just do it, So I think that's what it is. I think it is more nuanced than just skip or don't skip. But I think the core heart of it should not be, no, you're not allowed to. But I do think for more intellectual discussions on it, then you should be self-aware of the fact that you don't have all the context. It's not really fair to all those people that they should have to then be like, all right, what parts did you skip? Oh, I skipped like 1 and 3. Well, it's like, okay, well, I guess the conversation is like 70% less interesting.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think the big reason why there has or was such a big pushback against the idea of skipping parts was also that when it really became a thing where people were talking about it, it was so transparent that the only reason anyone would want to skip parts was so they could get to the currently sort of popular one, so they could join the conversation. And it's sort of like,
which deludes it.
Yeah, like we don't want you here. I'm sorry, we don't want you talking about like your opinion on a 35-year-old series if you've only watched the last sort of 2 years of it. And I mean, it's fine to have an opinion on it, but it's hard then for us to have a discussion about it because I'll be talking about things you haven't seen, and you will be basing your conclusion on unfinished information. And it's sort of like, yeah, it's not a great situation to be in. Please don't put me in that.
So I would say that's the fact. For personal enjoyment, do whatever you want. If you're going to involve other people, have some common courtesy and either don't insert yourself in the conversation for those deeper discussions, or just watch it so you can talk about that stuff. Don't have to lower the conversation. But if you want to but doesn't mean like you come in and you're not allowed to be like, my favorite Joestar is Jotaro. Here's why I like him, and we can all look at you and go, that's really nice. I'm glad you like Jotaro.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But okay. Yeah. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah, part 3. So I guess if we're unless you had anything other preamble for part 3, I would like to talk about Jotaro.
Yeah, go right ahead. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal knowledge about it, but I'll sprinkle it in as we go. So go ahead. What do you think of Jotaro?
Jotaro is really cool. I like him a lot. I thought I wouldn't, just simply because that's not usually my archetype. But I think what Araki always does is he always makes sure to show you from the jump, however he does it, all these boys are good boys. And Jotaro is a good boy because literally the first thing he does is he's like, screw you, die. But I mean, I'm saying that because I'm in a jail and I don't want you to get me out so I can hurt people. And I don't like that. I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, he's a good boy. Like, or like, whenever his mom doesn't come to kiss him on the nose or whatever before school, he notices, and he goes and he checks up on her and he wants to fight for her and stuff. So from there, Jotaro can just be as like stoic and badass as he wants because I know he's a good boy. And he doesn't have to he doesn't even really need to have moments where like that really comes out of like, normally I wouldn't say this, but I love my mom. Like, I know, I get it. So he can just be cool the whole time. So I really, really, really like Jotaro. He's great. I really love his design. I love his stupid chain. I love his stupid hair hat. I love every stupid thing about him. He's great. And I love that he's just a good boy. But he's quiet. I like how it's always very satisfying when he figures out villain's plan and then he gets to aura all over their face. I love the English dub for Star Platinum. Is that his name? Am I stupid? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I almost said Diamond is Unbreakable. I was like, wait, that's part 4.
Yeah.
Star Platinum is aura. Like I just love the way whoever does that. So.
That's sometimes it's Jotaro's voice actor, Matt Mercer, and sometimes it's actually Dio's voice actor.
Oh, okay. Well,
it interchanges.
Cool. Ooh, maybe that's foreshadowing. Maybe they did that on purpose. But yeah, I really like that. But yeah, Jotaro's just cool the whole time. I love his design. He is a character who I just like being around and just seeing him exist. And like that one guy who his whole thing is like he puts a little stand inside of Joseph and he's like, I'm gonna kill your granddad, let me walk on top of you. And he's like, oh, sorry, don't mind me, I'm just writing your bill out, so when I pummel your face into the ground, it'll you'll get your receipt in full. Like
yes. He's so overly badass that it almost loops around to being cringe, but because it feels so genuine, it never crosses that border of being actually cringe with Jotaro. And I think it's aided by the fact that he doesn't have a lot of talking about himself. So you have to, whatever you know about him, through his actions and his facial expressions. So for me, I've always, my favorite moments in part 3 is basically whenever Jotaro cracks a smile.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then I also think the best part about him, that someone brought this up and I thought, that's a genius, thank you for bringing this to my attention, is they brought up stands are obviously the embodiment, and we'll talk about stands, but stands are the embodiment of the person's soul, right? They're what they reflect them. And it's well, Jotaro is a super quiet boy, but his stand is pure emotional rage and catharsis. So it's Jotaro actually may feel the most. He just doesn't express it except through his stand. And I was like, yeah. I like it.
Yeah, so, this is where stands get fun, when you can make those interpretations, because you are very much supposed to, I think, especially in later parts, to look at the stands and be like, what are you hiding? Or what are you what's behind the facade here, Jotaro?
What does this rat think? Does he want to destroy the world with his gun? I don't know. But maybe he's ambitious. He's an entrepreneur. But But yeah, Jotaro's cool. I love pretty much love everything about him. It took a little bit for that to fully click in with me, where I was like, okay, am I supposed to expect little moments where he's going to show he cares, all that kind of stuff? But I liked instead, like you said, it was always shown through action or, the odd smile or whatever, which is great and cool. He also looks like he's 40, and that's pretty cool too. I like that. But yeah, so yeah, that's my opinion on Jotaro, and then we can. One last thing, which is that he has the best fight in the whole season, which is the gambling battle.
Yes. Oh my god.
Where he just lies his way to victory, and that was the best, I think, fight in the whole season.
Yes.
Which is just that, because it is entirely what I want stand battles to be, which is mind games that are happening moment to moment. And so you have the moment to moment thing with Joseph, and then with Jotaro, he has the amazing play of just being able to prove that, one, I can catch you if you're cheating. So that puts the fear, and that's all he needs. Because then for the rest, all he has to do is just up the ante so that guy thinks, wait, I know he can tell I'm cheating at points, but I'm the best cheater, so I'm not going to fold. Fuck you, I'm not going to do it. I think his hair literally turns from black to gray. Like he's that stressed out.
He ages because he's so stressed out. And
then you get the greatest moment, which is when Jotaro goes like, yeah, my hand was, it looks like my hand was pretty shit. That would have been really embarrassing if I lost.
Yeah.
And Abdul's terrified. He's like, Jotaro, that's your mom's soul, my guy. Are you sane right now? Your grandpa. He's like, dude, can I take your soul too? He's like,
yeah, no. Dobby the Gambler is maybe one of my favorite stand fights in all of JoJo, not just part 3.
Yeah.
It's because obviously part 3 is the first part with stands, and it feels like such an early high point of what the concept can do. Where it's just the stand isn't really a participant in the fight, it's just a supernatural element to a tense situation. And that's sort of what makes it super cool. But yeah, no, I agree. Dobby the Gambler is a fantastic fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do think this wouldn't have made it necessarily better, but I do think it would have been a funny twist if this was actually just some asshole who had information and they thought he had a stand or whatever. But he was saving it. It's no, he just is some guy who just wanted to challenge these guys to a game. But the stand stuff obviously makes it way more tense, because literally souls are on the line. But I thought that was where we were going at first, was that this was going to be the one guy we face who's just a guy. Which would have been pretty funny. But yeah, I guess we should get into stands, right? Do you have any questions about that?
Okay, so I'm assuming you knew about the existence of stands beforehand.
Yes, but I never knew what they were. I would hear memes about oh, it's my enemy stand, or oh, this is stands. But I would I was like, I don't have the full context, so I just let it slide over me. So it was cool to see what they were, and that they were kind of these anthro extensions of powers and stuff.
Yeah, and so I guess basically, how did the introduction sort of strike you? Because obviously, you go 2 parts with Hamon, and then suddenly they're like, okay, that's over, stand time now. How did that go over for you?
I thought it was good, just simply because I had understood that Hamon was only really fun because Joseph made it fun, and so kind of then to have this basically this challenge to Araki, which I think was what made Joseph fights really good, was he had to challenge himself to be like, all right, what random object lying around can I give to Joseph so he can win, and then make it seem like it was planned and clever. But now he can actually plan ahead and have to come up with he has to be creative in a different way, which is, oh crap, every episode or every fight, I have to come up with a complete unique stand with unique properties and unique things, and I have to take into account how my heroes can face off against it, which is, I'm assuming, why he made them very simple. And then so he could kind of plan in that way. So I think that the introduction was really good, just because I was ready to move on. I knew it was coming, and so I was just like, as long as they mention that Hamon still exists, I'll be good. But and they did. So when stands were introduced, I just thought, oh, this is really, really cool. I really like how Jotaro's looks, so I like the aesthetic of it. I liked the idea that people couldn't see it, so that kind of gave a fun little thing where they could consistently like enemies could use the environment of like, this guy's choking this guy out, and it's like he's just like standing away from him, and it's like, that guy's a maniac. It's like, no, we're having a stand fight. So I just think in general that it was a strong introduction, and I appreciated that they also had a comedic introduction by giving Joseph the most weirdly not complex but contrived stand, which is just that he has to punch an over 300 yen camera, and then it will produce the plot future.
Yes.
So then that told me like, okay, we're still having fun. So
yeah,
but yeah, I liked them.
Yeah, because stands in part 3, they're very much sort of again, they're kind of like Jonathan in part 1, where it's a cool idea that Araki is still figuring out. Because you mentioned that a lot of like the main guys' stands are pretty simple. Like Avdol's stand is literally just fire, like that's just it. And it is really satisfying to sort of go from part 3, where stands start out fairly simple, to part 4, and then 5 and 6, where stands become extremely situational and very, very sort of specific in what they can do, because it facilitates more fight, like the gambling fight, where everyone involved just has to constantly like calculate, okay, what can I do if these are the rules? I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where like Jojo characters be like, I can instantly kill you, but only if you're Brazilian and it's a Tuesday.
No.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how fights get as the series progresses.
Well, that sounds
sort of
fun. Yeah.
Yes. Are you okay with me telling you like something minor from like a later part, or do you want to go fully blind? Okay, because part 6 has a really good example of this, where it's a fairly standard action situation. It's a shootout, except there's a stand afoot that makes everyone unable to remember more than 3 things at once.
Okay.
And that, for example, means that you can only keep track of the position of 3 bullets at once. If you see a 4th bullet, you forget what a first one is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and so stuff like that becomes extremely common in JoJo. So part 3 is interesting in that it feels like the infancy of it, and you only get like glimpses of it through like the gambling fight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds really cool and really exciting, because that was, when we get to it, part 4 was I really like some of the stands they came up with, but we'll save that. Yeah. So now I messaged you and I said that my hot take is that I think Joseph fights are mostly better than stand fights in part 3. And I still stand by this. And I think there's I figured out the reason why. Because when I'm thinking about all of the stand fights in part 3, I'm like, well, that was really cool. I was like, oh man, but that was really clever too, how they solved this. Like I really like the one with the girl who has all the magnets. And then they have to kind of play her, where they have to let the magnetism get even stronger and stronger. So then they can be like, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know how magnets work. And then they crush her. Which is great. That one's really cool. Oingo Boingo. That is one I sincerely love. And I love that they give them a special ED. That's hilarious.
Yes.
Everything about that kid's power is great. And I love the first use of it with the brother, where as soon as you realize what's happening, you're like, this poor man, he's gonna die. And so you get fun stuff with that. I like kind of like having the battle with the pet shop, and you have a little dog in Falcon fight, and he has to use like condensed explosions to get him or whatever. Even the monkey who owns a ship, that was really cool. This idea of the ship just like killing people or whatever. So that stuff and like they fight a car, all that stuff. So I think all that stuff is cool. Where part 3 betrays me is that it always has to have the build-up phase. And I just don't think the build-up phase is that interesting. Where it usually boils down to something weird is happening and everyone goes, well, it's probably nothing, or it might be a stand. We're not sure. So that's the first half of part 1. And then the second half of part 1 is then the villain uses it and they go, oh, golly gosh, how are we going to get out of this? And then the first half of part 2 is also, golly gosh, how are we going to get out of this? And then finally we kind of figure out the way to get through it. Or if it's a single episode, then it's kind of that, but in one episode. And usually my problem with it is, and I brought this up to you off camera or whatever, but I am not someone who is like into JoJo's, where I just want to
Mhm.
be in this world. I just want to watch these characters, so I'm okay with the build up. No, that hasn't really clicked for me. So then what I would look for is the directing. And the directing for part 3 is pretty much just kind of standard anime. It's a wide shot, or it's shot reverse shot, or it's like a kind of a cool angle or something like that. But it doesn't,
Mhm.
I never felt like there was when we were in these build-up phases, I never felt like there was a vibe being set up so that when the tension releases, I'm like, oh, that was really cool. And I'm kind of being whisked away. Instead, I was sitting there going, I think the biggest example of this is when they figured out Dio's power can stop time. And
Mhm.
literally it's like Joseph running away for like 5 minutes straight, being like, what did Kakuin mean? What could it possibly be? He hit the clock, but the clock he hit, how did he do that? He hit the handle. What could that mean? There goes the old man. What is he doing? Clock, time.
Mhm.
Wait a second. What could it be? I know. Old man, did you figure out the power? I do know the power, but Kakui told me the power, which was with the clock, which is that Dio can stop time. Holy shit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I figured that out like 10 minutes ago.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like that was a lot of stand fights in part 3, where I like thinking about them when I can think of all the cool parts. But in the
Mm.
moment when I was watching all the buildup, it just never entertained me until we get to the part where they have to come up with a clever solution, which is why the Darby fight is my favorite, because every second of that fight is a back and forth. Whereas usually
Mhm.
how it goes is the first half is the villain doing their thing, and then the second half is when the hero goes, aha, I figured out a way to trick you.
Mhm.
But I just felt it was too long.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really feel that. And I think it's especially bad in part 3 because part three's anime, I think I told you this in the DMs. Part three's anime is intentionally elongated
Okay.
because they wanted it to be sort of an event.
Yeah.
And so you really get, like, the way you described it is almost basically the formula. It's like you have one episode where they're trying to figure out, oh, is this a stand? Oh no, it is a stand. And then the episode ends, and you have the next episode where most of like the actual fun stuff happens. And that like 2 episode division works for some fights, but I will absolutely agree. There are some where I think, why the fuck was this 2 episodes? Why wasn't this like 5 minutes?
Mhm.
And I mean, reaching into the future, but do you think that gets better at all in part 4?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
Every
because
every
I
part
think so.
every fight in part 4, I was engaged. So
Good. Yeah. Because that's, for example, again, some. Oh, look, part 5 lover. Can't stop talking about part 5. But it is something I genuinely love about part 5. It is so fast paced. Like, it is
okay, good.
just. They have no room to breathe. It's like, oh shit, we just finished one fight. Oh fuck, here comes the next guy.
Yeah.
And you know, the fact that they're explicitly stand warriors makes it easier for them to figure out that, okay, we're fighting now, and makes it a little faster pace. But yeah, I definitely agree, especially sort of the second half of part 3
Yeah.
once
That's
they
where it gets
get
really
to
bad.
Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, what comes to mind is Alessi, the guy who can make you young again. I
Yes.
hate that fight.
And that one's very uncomfortable for other reasons. But
Well, it's that, and also what has always annoyed me about that fucking fight is, so you have a guy who can revert people into a younger state. I wonder if we have a character whose younger form we know and love. And it's like he never uses that power on Joseph.
yeah, you're right. No, that's a
Yeah.
good point. That would have been really cool. I like the
Yeah.
ending of it. Again, I like which is just that Jotaro was a badass even as a baby. But
Yes, that is
yeah,
pretty funny.
but again, and I wonder if like, because do people love the part 3 of the anime?
Part 3, they love the start and they love the ending, but generally most people agree that it is paced like garbage in some
Okay.
places.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah.
gonna say like if it was beloved, I would wonder if it is just that people remember the best parts, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, have you rewatched it and had to
Yeah.
sit through to the big parts? But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I'm trying to think of a fight. I mean, I was kind of disappointed by Joseph's fight, his one fight he gets where it's just him with the little growth on his arm.
Mhm.
Simply because I didn't think it didn't feel as fun as like a normal Joseph fight where like you would when Araki would tell you like he used these things in the environment, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Instead, it was like
Mhm.
he like punched into the ground a map so he could find a tar pit, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm like, I know they've already had him use the power on like different things, so that's fine. But how does it? Was he thinking of like where a tar pit would be? I'm like, is it just that it gives him the future and it's always the plot future, so he knew to find that? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it just felt really weird. And then by the end when he won, like, I clapped when he was like, now you're gonna say blah blah blah. But other than that, I was kind of like, okay, well, it didn't really feel that satisfying that you won. Because it was just kind of, you just kind of did it. So yeah, that's kind of my big thing with part 3, is that a lot of it really just melted together. And I'm not one of those people who even needs like, and where was the plot? Come on, guys. I love episodic stories. And I think the framework of this was set up to allow that with the 50 days. I just don't think the time was used well. I think that, and I don't think the directing is that interesting. So unless you can remember something, from my experience, from all I remember is it was just very basic directing of, here's a shot of the character, we're moving, like there was never like a mood, like an atmosphere, if that makes sense, through the eyes of the directing.
I feel like it depends really on the episode, because Jojo as a whole throughout the entire anime is kind of a direction first, animation second product, in that most parts are not animated very well. Like a lot of them are genuinely just PowerPoint presentations, especially parts 1 and 2. But part 3, I think, just suffers from its general like look, right? Because it has the worst art style of any part, in my opinion. The fucking boulder shoulders, I'm not a big fan of those. It is very drab and brown because, they're mostly in the desert and sort of desert regions. And so really the only time the direction really shines for me is whenever they change color, which they do still do a lot of, but I do agree that it doesn't stick out as much as it really should. It does do its job. I do think it makes up for the fact that most of the time many things aren't moving, that you're often just looking at still images, and it manages to mask that very well. And I think that in of itself is an achievement. But I do agree that there's very little where it like sticks out to me.
Well, oh, sorry, good. Continue.
No, I was just gonna go and basically.
and yeah. Well, and for me, like, I'm someone who I think that I'm not someone who kind of sees it as I don't know if you were saying it this way, but I don't even think it's inherently a negative to not have a lot of animation, as long as you are using the shortcuts at your disposal in a positive way. I think part 1 and 2, they can get away with it because 1, the plot is a bit more snappier, and 2, the images, like you said, are highly detailed and they're different colors through between shots. Sometimes they'll put words on the screen. Whereas I think part 3 still has that. It's just longer. And that's where it starts to be like, okay, can we please not? But hey, to more positives, I guess we could talk about the other characters.
Yes.
So Joseph, like I said, he is more just like fine, he's I enjoy that he's here, he's being grandpa or whatever. I kind of wish he got to be more funny, kind of got to do more fights. I like the one with him and Avdol, where they have to fight the magnet girl. I thought that was good. But he's mostly just like fine. I think he's cool to be around. Polnareff, I don't think this is a hot take. I think he is the best developed of the side friends. And I really like him. I like his different states of emotions. One of the fights that I did think was worth being 2 parts was when they fight the guy who can jump between reflections. And that one actually had a moment to moment value to it. And I love the creative solution of like, he's jumping between all these eyes and he's made them come over here because we have money. Okay, we'll use that to our advantage. I'll toss the money into the air, kick dirt in that guy's eyes, but he'll be looking up, so he'll jump into the penny and I stab ya. So like that was really clever and really cool. And yeah, Polnareff's he's just good. I think he has a really cool stand design. I think he has a cool backstory. He gets a lot of character moments with all the friends, like when he does the goofy handshake with like Kakouine. He's just good. I like Polnareff.
Yeah, no, I that really isn't the hot take. People generally like Polnareff. I like that because he's one of the characters with like an explicit sort of character motivation and development within that motivation, where he's looking for a Jagail to avenge his sister, which is more concrete really than anyone besides like Jotaro. Because I mean, Kakyoin just comes along because he wants to, and Avdol exists, and Iggy is a dog.
Because as Kakouine says, I mean, if I was gonna marry someone, I would basically want it to be your mother's.
Yes, MILF Hunter Kakyoin.
What did he get for it in the end?
Yeah. But I do like Kakyoin a lot. He's very endearing.
Here's the thing, I actually like all the boys, even if like I know some people have said like besides Polnareff, they're not that in depth. But I think like this arc does embody just like everyone being good, tough boys. Like we're just men going on a journey and being cool guys and caring about each other, and that's it. I like it.
Yeah, like it's just the boys hanging out, the part, and I think that's all I need from it. I don't need everyone to be, super profound allegories for human struggle. Like they're cool. Polnareff wants to avenge his sister. Kakyoin likes older women. Avdol is there. I'm fine with that.
I'll defend Avdol. I think what he has is that I think he works as like the first good boy because he literally like obviously sacrifices himself twice. And also, like, I think he's similar to Kakyoin. I think there is a genuine respect to a person who's just like, I have nothing to do with this, but like that really sucks that your daughter is gonna die. She doesn't deserve this, so I will fight for you guys. And so I think I think he's just another one of the good boys. I like his English voice actor a lot though, so maybe that helps. And I think like I kind of like that he has kind of this just this good rapport with everybody. Everyone just likes Avdol in the group.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of something you need, where you have someone who basically anytime there was a fight, I was pretty much always certain that Avdol was going to like pull through in whatever he needed to do. Cause that's just the kind of guy he is. He's like the Rock.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about like some quirky characteristic that's going to throw him off, or you don't have to worry about like him not being as strong as he needs to be. He's just going to help. And so I think like he embodies that, he embodies that primal male feeling of you are told to do a task and then some other guy you don't know comes in to help you do that task. And by the end, you have an amount of respect that they put in effort to do a thing alongside you.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a thing other guys relate to, but I relate to this strongly whenever it's like, we have to pick up the chairs from like the family meeting or whatever. And some guy who's like there dating a cousin or whatever is just like, hey, I'll help you pick up a chair. I'm like, wow. That's really cool of you, dude.
That's an interesting angle. I never thought of it that way. Very cool.
So I like Avdol. Kakyoin, like you said, he's a good boy too. Went out like a champ. So that was good. And yeah, who's left? I think that's it.
Iggy.
Oh, and Iggy, of course. Iggy definitely is a dog. I do like the one little bit of characterization they give him of or two bits. The pride thing, which is that the whole time he's just kind of here because we brought him along and he doesn't like it, but whatever, he'll hang out, I guess. But then once it's actually personal, once he gets the crap beat out of him by Pet Shop, he's like, all right, come with me, boys. We're gonna go take down the vampire.
Yeah.
So there's like that's like a nice moment of like resolution from him. And I do like his dynamic with Polnareff. I like that he saves the day. Also, the way he goes out is like, I'm not one of those people where it's like if in a show I see like an animal, my brain connects it to another animal and like I get really emotional. But his death was really emotional because like it wasn't like Avdol, who kind of had like a heroic send off that felt like, and there goes his arms and he's gone. He pushed you out of the way. Instead, he just kind of gets crumpled under sand and dies and like lets out a whimper. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, but in the it still sort of saves Polnareff in those last moments.
Yeah, he does. He does still save him.
Yeah. And I think one of the coolest things with part 3 for me is that it has this like road movie feeling of just people hanging out together, and then they just start dying. And
yes,
I don't know. I like it in a way. It makes it feel like there's real weight behind the fight against Dio. That's not just a fun thing to do. And it really differentiates it from the other fights they've had so far. Because in the others, they were always in mortal danger, but, no one really ever got permanently hurt. I mean, Avdol fake dies once and comes back, but it's fine. He's back. And Kakyoin, gets scratched on the eyes, but then he's fine as well. And then you get to like the Dio's mansion, and it's just, oh God, they're dropping.
Yeah, and I think maybe that would make a rewatch. If I ever decided to, like years down the line, maybe that would make it better, because then there would kind of be like retroactive stakes of like enjoy this time while you have it, because they won't in the end.
Yeah.
And also, this is something that Super Eye Patch Wolf brought up that I agree with, because I watched his like little review of part 3. I really, really like how much Araki likes other cultures and wants to show it off. Like,
Yes.
we got, like you said, obviously, like the color palette's very brown, but that didn't really bother me too much because it always did feel like we were seeing a different place that obviously exists, and that he just really appreciates getting to go to those places. Like, this is a very kind of a unique setting, I think, for a shonen adventure. And I really liked, that was the best part, I think, about every episode, was just seeing the new locations and kind of really feeling like, oh wow, I'm getting kind of to see different stuff. So I really appreciate that. Like, that's where, again, it kind of feels like Araki's just doing what he wants, where it's like he looked at a map and he was like, I've always wondered what's over here, and then he checked and he was like, this is cool, we're going here now.
Yeah.
So
because okay, so here's anecdote number 1 about part 3, namely that what inspired Araki to make it, or at least partially, is when he started traveling sort of for holiday. He apparently at some point at the airport had this thought of, oh my god, what if some of these randos I'm sitting next to actually want to kill me? And so from there he developed this idea of, it is completely normal for you to stand next to hundreds of strangers across one day, more if you're traveling. And in a way, it's kind of weird that doesn't terrify us.
Yeah.
And so he wanted this idea of constantly being on the move and constantly being attacked from the unknown. And this idea of, in a crowd, who could be secretly evil, obviously then gets evolved in part 4 with, oh my god, you could walk past a serial killer every day without knowing. And anecdote number 2, and this is a question to you, and a fact, there is one character in part 3 that was supposed to be part of the Crusaders, of the boys, that was then didn't join them in the end, but they are in the show. Can you guess who it is?
Is it the girl?
Which girl? The little one?
The runaway girl?
No.
Okay. Then I don't know.
Whole Horse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was supposed to betray Dio and become like part of the crew. And that idea was scrapped very early on once Araki decided on his stand and was like, holy shit, I cannot give one of my main characters
a gun.
A gun, yeah, because first of all, optics. Second of all, it would just make a lot of fights very boring because you can just shoot people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just your anecdote for the minute.
All right. Well, yeah, that's cool. Speaking of the girl, what is up with that? Not the weirdo stuff with the ape, whatever. Like, the anime did its thing, Araki did his thing, we'll move on. But
yeah,
why is she just like here and then she's gone and then she comes back for one episode to fight a car and then they're like, go home?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I got nothing there.
Is that the one Araki forgot? And more of like he was like, what am I doing with her?
I think it was more so that part 3 is the one that feels the most written sort of from moment to moment out of all the parts, where it's like, I don't think he had much of a plan between setting up the Dio fight and the Dio fight.
Yeah.
Which you can also see in the fact that, for example, Dio randomly has a different stand at the start of the show, where he has the crystal ball in Kakurin's flashback.
Oh, okay.
Which is a remnant. People assume it's a remnant from a version of the story where Dio's stand would have been that he has every stand. So he would also have Hermit Purple. That's never been really confirmed. It's since been retconned through data books that actually that was Jonathan's stand that Dio awakened. And that it is similar, and that the way, the same way how Dio and Jotaro have the same type of stand, Jonathan and Joseph would have the same type of stand due to their connection to Hamon. But again, that's sort of outside of the story stuff that Araki has added later on to explain what was probably really just a change of mind.
Yeah, which is no big deal. Who cares?
Yeah. But part 3 really is the part where I think Araki was writing as he went along. And yeah, the little girl, Anne, I think she's a great example of that, where it's like, I've introduced this character. I will not show her until I need another character in a scene. Oh, there she is. Goodbye.
Yeah. And I actually liked her. Like, I liked the idea of them having someone they had to kind of like babysit and who was just kind of like kind of growing to like Jotaro and all these things. I wouldn't want her there forever, but I thought like, oh, if the payoff for this is, she actually gets to do something cool or like find happiness or whatever, then like that would be really fun. But instead they're like, all right, go home.
Yeah. They just leave.
Yeah, so I was just like, oh well, goodbye. I know in the anime they give her a name, and then in the manga I think she's literally just the runaway kid, which I kind of like better. I kind of like better that if they had just said like kid or whatever, they just never ask her her name. We don't care. We'll just make sure you don't die.
Yeah.
But that's also what I think makes them feel like good boys early on, is that like they're always like, all right, where's the girl so we can make sure that she doesn't get in trouble in all of this? We'll buy her a hotel room. We'll feed her food. Like they just literally just take her in and then just like become her 5 dads for a little bit. And then she leaves. Like, well, I guess she's doing her own thing. So there's like, I think there's value in her being there early on. And I think it would have been, I mean, it's unfortunate we didn't do anything with her, but I don't like think her inclusion. It's like, well, if you weren't going to do anything with her, then kick her out. I think early on she works good as a hostage, mostly just because, which could be annoying, but I think she works just because she's got the tomboy spirit, and that's usually endearing, especially if she's around like a bunch of guys. So her being like, Jotaro, you suck, fuck you, and then she's like, man, it's cute.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so wait, I think at this point we should go to the main event himself, right?
Dio and his fight. Is that what you're thinking? Two more final anecdotes for Mr. Joseph Lover. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you've peeked into the Japanese version, but in Japanese, Joseph continuously speaks in half English and half Japanese.
I assumed that's why he keeps going, oh my god.
Exactly.
Yes. In the English.
Yes. And second fun fact, there is an old Part 3 video game where you can play as the child guy that makes you younger. And you can use his ability on Joseph, and that's the only way you can play young Joseph in that game.
That's fun.
Yeah, just I thought you'd appreciate that.
Well, I do. And I guess real quick, we'll mention it. I have like almost nothing to say. I did watch the OVA. Didn't really add or subtract much to me. It's obviously old, so you can lick the dirt off the cells. That's how it looks, and that's pretty cool. But in certain cases, it just made everything slower because it's old anime. So
yeah. Did you watch it? Do you watch it in dub or sub?
I watched it in dub and sub because I watched the sub for a bit, and I was like, well, I'll watch the dub, and then all the dub was like guys in my basement talking onto potatoes, and I was like, well, maybe not.
Well, because the senator that Dio kills, he's voiced by Charles Martinet in the dub.
No, Mario.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay. But yeah, I didn't really get anything more or against it, just more of like, oh, here's some cool screenshots. But the pacing just kind of got slower. So I was just kind of like, well, let's skim through this a little more.
Yeah. I will say I do prefer the OVA's character designs for the most part. Just because
it's just old, cool looking.
Yeah, and they look more like humans, whereas in Part 3, like the David Pro adaptation, they kind of look like machines at times. Like again, the shoulders, I cannot get over the fucking shoulders.
They look like action figures. Like
yeah. And I hate the way Dio's hair looks in the Part 3 anime.
Which hairdo? Because at one point he takes a break to put on lipstick and give himself a haircut.
Yes, that's true. But I just like the first phase where it just looks like he has spaghetti for hair.
I like the second phase more because I think he looks so ridiculous.
He does.
he looks like he's gonna go on like a stage and like pose.
That form is actually officially called High Dio. So do
you have any explanation for how it happened? Because he really does just change character designs in the fight.
Well, the explanation in the story, right, is that he sucks up Joseph's blood and then he reaches his quota of Joestar blood and thus fully sort of absorbs Jonathan's power and thus sort of gets control over his body. I could not tell you what happens to his hair and outfit. That's not for me to tell you.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to. Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, I just assumed, yeah, obviously he got a power up, but I was like, but how does that shrink your hair and like give you lipstick and change your outfit?
It's kind of like how in how in Part 4, Kira gets the arrow upgrade, and he goes from having just normal black hair to suddenly, having like a coconut on his head.
I just thought he was a freak boy. I thought he did that to himself, and his wife is so into him she doesn't bother asking.
Fair enough. But all right, so what are your thoughts on the fight against Dio and like the arc called Dio's World?
Okay, that's what it's called. First of all,
Yeah.
am I blind, or did they not adapt the iconic panel of Dio walking towards Jotaro from the manga? Is that not in the anime?
Nope, it's not in the anime.
Why?
It's just, I mean, there's a shot of them walking towards each other, but it's basically a complete recreation / replacement for that shot.
Yeah, that made me sad. I was waiting for it because I was waiting for it to be like an end shot, where it's like the shot, and then like maybe it would turn into like, how sometimes they'll do this in old anime, will turn into like a painting
Yes.
of like the final shot. I thought they were gonna do that, and I was waiting for it. And I was checking like the after credit scenes. I was like, wait, it's got to be here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But okay. So first of all, positives. I really, really like I think this is where the aesthetic of the anime really shines. The art, like the lighting and the aesthetic of all of the Dio fight is great. In this, and I love that I thought they were going to be fighting in this castle or whatever, or this little building, and I was going to be upset, but no, they just fight all over Egypt or Cairo, yeah, which is great. I love that. And so that was really cool. I love that it took place at night, all the street things. I think my favorite part of the whole fight is when he first uses the world on Jotaro, and then Jotaro's hand moves towards him and it freaks him out, and then we find out it was just magnets.
Yes.
Like, yes. That's what I want. And then I love like him having books, and like he has to like stop his own heart. I love that Dio is like very like he's literally very traumatized from Jonathan, clearly.
Yes.
These Joestars, if I give them even anything, they will kill me. Even if I have literally time-stopping powers, I cannot hold back. But I also can't just like go all out because they'll take advantage of that. So like he has to like he's literally standing away, and he's like, okay, did he breathe? Is his hand moving? I don't want to get close and check. So I'm gonna put my head to the ground. Can I hear anything? Okay, I think I'm good. I think I can kill him. Literally like a potentially unconscious man, and he's got like the best power ever, and all these other things, and he's just like, okay, just gotta be delicate here. Which is really funny. Real quick, I'll ask you about this. I didn't think this was a problem, but what do you think of the fact that Dio just doesn't use any of his vampire powers, like freezing people from a touch, laser beam eyes?
My explanation for that, or my head sort of explanation for that, has always been he doesn't really need to, because with Time Stop, he has a power beyond anything the vampire abilities gave him. And the thing with Dio is that he is kind of an idiot most of the time. And so he's so obsessed with the world, with his new like toy, that he kind of does. In my head, it's just like he probably doesn't even realize anymore that he has those abilities. And
at least.
Yeah, because obviously there is Over Heaven, Dio's Diary, which obviously like ties a lot of things together and fills a lot of plot holes. And I don't know if you noticed, but I actually produced an audiobook of that.
I saw that. Do you do the Dio voice the whole way through?
I tried to, but it's 5 hours long.
So at the very beginning, you're like, "Oh, Jonathan," and by the end, you're like, "Ah, Jonathan." This is
no. I tried to give that Patrick Seitz inflection, but I couldn't do it the entire time. But in that book, you actually do get kind of an explanation for why he doesn't use the vampire powers, which is literally just that he doesn't assume they're going to work against stand users, because he thinks that with Jonathan and sort of Jonathan's crew, the only reason he was above them was because they were normal humans and he had vampire powers. But what if he encounters a stand user who isn't actually weakened by being frozen, but whose stand makes them stronger when they're frozen? He cannot know, and so he chooses to be more prudent. Because that book also goes really hard on the fact how traumatized he is by the fact that humans will always find a way to defeat him. Okay. So yeah, it's never bothered me, because to me it's also like, in part 3, I don't really want to see vampire stuff anymore. I'm done with that. Like, the little bit that comes back with it with Vanilla Ice, I think that's cool.
Yeah, I liked that. I
Um,
really liked that solution of like, oh, he's a vampire. Got it. And it's like,
yeah,
oh yeah, that was clever.
yeah,
That was a good aha moment. Um,
yes, exactly.
but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but besides that, I really think the star of the fight should be the world, and it is. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So for me, it's one of those things where it's like, um, from like a strategical standpoint, I would say, um, like obviously it was a bad move, but I think your explanation and what my explanation is just as long as you can give me like a character reason, like that makes sense, then I'll usually accept anything a character does. As far as like if it's like, oh, that wasn't mathematically the correct button input to win the fight. This is horribly written. And my reason is just that I don't think Dio thought that those powers were worth using because he has the world. So I can buy that his ego was just the reason. But that real quick, like as a little side tangent, how do you feel about that in stories where sometimes you do have to fill in the blanks, but it's like it doesn't annoy you, where like it doesn't feel like sometimes I'll have things in stories where I'll be like, as long as I can think of an answer, then I'm fine with that not being confirmed, but being reasonable. Like basically I think it's almost the opposite of a bad faith take, where you're giving the most benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, if this story is just the story, this world that it exists in, then what could be a logical explanation? If there is a logical explanation in the world, not what was written for me, but literally within the mechanics of the world or the characters of the world, then fine, I can accept that, and the plot hole doesn't really matter for me. Like it kind of just fills in itself. Do you kind of have like a metric for that, or is it kind of? I mean, obviously it's case by case, but how do you feel about that in stories where sometimes that can be a problem of like I mentioned earlier? It's like, well, you didn't tell me that Dio Vampire Boy and Dio Rich Kid are extensions of each other, so I don't really buy it. But with this, I can just buy. Oh, Dio probably just doesn't care, and I don't need you to tell me that. I can buy it. Yeah. Whatever, it's fine.
For me, it's one of those things where, like, if it happens in a story, most of the time I'll be fine. I will just, as you said, fill in the blank. It comes down to sort of how do I feel about the author's intention here? Because if it feels like the author is entirely relying on that, eventually my goodwill will run out.
Yeah.
But if it's something like Jojo, where it feels less like he's relying on that and more sort of that it's just a consequence of the fact that Araki is very single-minded on like whatever he wants to write at the time, then I'm much more forgiving, because it's like, yeah, look, you've been writing this for 35 years. You want to reinvent the story continuously, and sometimes things are just going to be left unsaid. I'm fine. I know this universe. I know the way stands and sort of these characters work. So I'm not like, I'm not very mad about it. I think it does get iffy with Jojo in some points, specifically that kind of the most important in-universe mechanic to like the larger plot kind of goes unsaid, as in they do mention it, but it never gets the sort of explanation that I feel it deserves. And we'll get to that once we get to discuss sort of the next trilogy.
Okay.
But that's sort of the only time where I feel like, he could have done more with that. But for the most part, my brain does smooth it over.
Yeah.
And even the things that kind of annoy me, I'm sort of like, yeah, I mean, whatever. As long as you have someone to explain it to you, I don't mind too much.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like, like it doesn't feel like laziness. That's the thing. As long as it doesn't feel like laziness, I'm fine.
Yeah, and also like I think it's a matter of like value within the fight of like, okay, let's say he did have freezing powers and laser beams. Well, the cost of that would be the fight would be a lot different than what we have, and I kind of like what we have and the simplicity of it. So fine, whatever. As long as there is a reason, then I'll allow it. So, but yeah. So okay, that's all that. Okay, now we're gonna get to the part that I don't like. So let me give you kind of an idea of my experience with part 3, which is that I started it, enjoyed it, but then slowly the journey started to fatigue me of like, okay, another guy. But the thing that always saved it was that we're going to get to Dio. And if all these fights, regardless of the buildup, they have great climaxes of these clever ways that our heroes are going to solve the problem. And during the Dio fight, they also have many moments where they do something clever, like the magnets or the heart stopping and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, good. But Araki, obviously, this whole journey has been leading to the Dio fight. So obviously he had to have planned how we're going to beat Dio in a clever way. And I really, really hate that the answer is, I also have the same power, and I just got really good at it during the fight, and also I can stop time, and now you're dead. And I'm like, Araki, and then also the finishing thing is he punches his kick or whatever, and it's, I guess the punch was really strong, I guess, and he incinerates and dies. And I'm like, Araki, my guy, I stuck with you, man. I was there through all of it. You promised me clever battle solutions, and you chose rule of cool in the time I didn't want it. No. Oh gosh. And it all came crashing down, and I couldn't believe it. I was freaking out. I was like, no, this is not possible. It's not possible that the answer to the question of how we beat Dio is I just also have the power and am better than you. No.
Okay, that's interesting, because I think I can actually cushion the blow a little for you, and give it some additional framework. So one, Jotaro is not better at time stop than Dio. The way he overcomes him basically is that he saves up his time stop and then times it just right for it to then overlap with when it ends for Dio, and therefore sort of overtakes him in the sort of stop time world without actually having a longer time stop. And I think they've already brought it up in part 4, but you're gonna keep seeing it that Jotaro's time stop keeps getting worse every part he's in. Yeah. And the explanation is that he never trains it. And even in like the Dio fight, the only reason it works is because he times it correctly. So that's the first thing that I hope, at the very least. I mean, this is a very controversial moment in the series, and I don't think I can fix it for you because, you know, my name doesn't rhyme with Karaki.
Well, to that way we don't leave this point completely, I will say, so yeah, you've changed the framing of it definitely, where it's not that he's just better. However, my implicit problem is just that throughout the fight, Dio's is also getting better, and so the timing feels a little weird that he is, I guess, matching this unknown time that's getting longer and shorter, and he times it perfectly, but then it also doesn't, like, because it's anime time, I get, but like now we're actually using time, so now it feels even more like anime bullshit. And I'm like, if you were gonna use time, then I feel like you maybe should have actually used normal time for once, because then I could actually maybe gauge it. But now but then my implicit problem, which you might be getting to, is just the fact that it's not just that Star Platinum has the same ability, like secretly. It's that he literally has the world. He literally has the same power. And going into this, my explanation for how he was going to win and was actually a mix of rule of cool, where I was going to allow it. I thought the idea was going to be he can stop time, but Jotaro is so fucking pissed, and his aura can punch so fast that he can punch faster than stopped time. I thought that was going to be the rule of cool. So I just would have preferred anything other than I literally have the same power.
No, I get it. And as I said, you're not alone at all with this. This is considered a big controversial sort of ending to JoJo. And you will notice that the endings of JoJo parts, besides part 1 and 2, they are always a little divisive. And I mean, I like most of them, but I can also see why. And, you know, me coming up with hashtag clever explanations is not meant to like dissuade you from your opinion. Like,
no, you're good. And I appreciate them. Sorry, I cut you off. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, all good. The other thing is that I don't know how much the dub commits to it, but at the very least in the manga, they make a point of saying how fast Star Platinum is throughout the entire part, specifically wording it as it is so fast, it's almost as if it is, you know, as if time doesn't affect it. And it happens a few times, and I'm assuming that's meant to be the, you know, the wick to the bomb.
Yeah. Whereas I thought the wick was leading to he can punch through the time stop because that's his cool power, and I was gonna be like, yeah fuck yeah. He just auras faster. That's a great shonen trope of like, I have the impenetrable armor, so you can't beat me. And then they punch it. It's like, what are you doing? That's not going to work. And then you punch again. It's like, I don't care. I'm going to keep punching. It's like, wait, no, stop. He's a madman.
Yeah, no. But so that setup of Star Platinum being fast was almost certainly meant to be, at the very least, that like build up towards, oh, he's actually fast. No, actually, he's not fast. He can stop time, because also right at the start, they say, oh, your stand, it like resonates with Dio because Dio's awakening of stands awakened your stand and all that. But again, I think this goes into the fact that psychic links and sort of the Joestar Brando curse is such an integral part to JoJo, and it's never explained in like one succinct way. And that's something that's kind of one of the things I meant, where it's like that would kind of need a text box somewhere, but it doesn't exist. You just have to intuit it from like watching the series and reading the manga, and eventually piecing together. And oh yes, there is like these psychic links that are a very material force within JoJo. But yeah, so that's sort of the in-universe thing. And unless you want to say something to that?
No, that's good. You're good.
Okay, the last thing is the final punch that beats Dio actually has definitive build-up towards it, which is that he punches Dio on his weak side, because Dio shows Whole Horse that one side of his body is healing slower than the other because it's a consequence of his body not yet accepting the head. And even with, the Joestar blood being complete and him being able to sort of power up, that seems to still be the case, because it is exactly that side that ends up splitting apart when Jotaro punches him.
Okay.
So it's not, so it's not complete like left field BS. It has like an explanation, at least sort of on paper.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think what it is that since conceptually I don't like it, as it kept going, I was like, wait, how does this make, what does this tie into? No, wait. Mm-hmm. So I was just overwhelmed of like, wait, hold on, no. But yeah, that's always been my biggest problem with part 3. Always, as if I've watched this for years. That's been my problem with part 3. Is just that I was so ready for Dio, and I thought, what is going to be the super clever way we do it? And I just inherently dislike the framework of, well, I just have the same power. When every other fight, what made them the best part was these creative solutions. And I know people can bring up like JoJo's about fade and like the thematic overall thing. I don't care. I came here for a clever fight, and it felt like at the last second Araki went, you know what? I've earned this. So I'm just going to do a rule of cool moment, which is that he just has the same power. And I do not accept your rule of cool. You give it back. It's not, you don't get it. It's not yours, Araki. And then, but because of that, it left kind of a bad taste in my mouth about not only that, but also the deaths of our characters, and also Holly, the mom we're trying to save, where I thought, okay, so at that point it felt like, oh, I was kind of taken for a ride. I thought the point of this arc was clever solutions to problems, but now we're just going to do rule of cool. And then now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, wait, well then like all our friends kind of died for like a pretty lame climax of just I have the same. And then I'm like, wait, well then also Holly, like now she just kind of feels like a pretext, so we could have just had a bunch of fight, which obviously she always was, but then now it feels even more kind of, I guess, like I don't know what the word is, like sad, where it's just like we don't even get to see them go home and like say like, oh mom, you're okay, or like, oh honey, my daughter, you're okay. It's just like, oh, here's a shot of her like better, the adventure's over, fuck off, leave. It's like so like that was the vibe I got from the ending, because of how it was just, he has the same power, fuck you, that's how he's gonna win. And then I was so flabbergasted by that it retroactively made the whole journey almost feel like a farce of like, oh, well, thanks for wasting my time. And now I'm like, well, oh, I guess the heart of the matter also was just kind of a farce. Like, oh, she got better. Does Jotaro and her dad get to see it? Who cares? You don't care. You came for the fights, idiot. I'm like, yeah, well, I came for a cool fight, and you didn't give it to me. So it really, like, part 3 is my least favorite part. That's I think now that I've definitely thought about it, because it really did just leave a bitter taste in my mouth when I got to the end, where I thought, I've been played. So that's my hot take about part 3. I hope any of that made sense, even if you vehemently disagree.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And part 3 for me has been the part that I very much didn't like the first time. As in, I literally dropped JoJo when I started part 3 the first time around. And the first time I watched it, I actually skipped from the middle to the Dio fight, because I was just so tired of the Egypt section. But the more I've returned to it, the more appreciation for it I have gained.
Okay.
And I think a big part sort of with that finale especially is that in JoJo, you have this trend where what you think the final fight is really just sort of the final move. Whereas the real final fight is sort of the scramble beforehand. Like if you think about, I mean, going a little bit into the future, if you think about Kira's final fight in part 4, where you could be reductive and say that, oh, the thing that beats him is the ambulance, right? But that's kind of not it. It's the whole struggle beforehand is what allows Kira to, in the end, be defeated by something so mundane. And I think this is something that Part 3 tries to do in a way that, it already started in Part 2 with, the volcano. But I think I agree that it does leave a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth because the final move is also kind of the final fight. It doesn't have that neat distinction like with Kira, where it's like you have to fight, you have to scramble, and then, oh no, Ambulance Chan has come in and killed him.
Where it's kind of like you get the feeling with the characters of it's over.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like it's that sudden like reality hitting. Oh, the other thing that added to that feeling of like Araki being like, fuck you, Ian, you wasted your time, is Joseph gets a literal death send-off where his spirit fades into the afterlife. And then we just kind of bring him back and he's like, lol, I'm a demon now. I'm like, you know what, Joseph? I don't know if I like you anymore. I don't think that's very nice of you. Here's the thing. I really like the heart of I love the moment for Jotaro where he's like, they're like, that's impossible. And he's like, people have been telling me things are impossible this entire journey. Fuck you, do it. And then it works. But I just wish that had been used on like Kakyoin, because I also feel like Kakyoin's death also feels a bit like, it's like, dude, he's just like a high school kid with like a mom and dad. He didn't deserve this. Whereas if Polnareff had died, I'd been like, well, he got closure. He's an adult. Or I think he is. He's doing his thing. Abdul, he came here to be the cool guy who helps me pick up after the party, and he died, and he was great, bro. Iggy, had his whole thing, but with like Kakyoin, or I think I'm saying his name right. It just kind of felt like, along with Joseph, it's like, oh, of course Joseph gets to come back because he's a Joestar, and we're just gonna fix him, I guess. Oh, great, yay! And all our friends are dead, and we're hugging at the station. Holly's better, guys, yay! Fly off. Part 3's done. Get out. I'm like, oh well.
Yeah.
So I've said the same thing over and over, but that was one thing that I remembered was Joseph. So,
well, the thing with Joseph for me is that I'm not a fan of fake out deaths, so I'm with you there that it feels a little off. What really annoys me is that you give Joseph a death scene and he doesn't say he doesn't say the one thing everyone wants him to say when he dies, which is, oh, Caesar, I'm coming to see you. Like, come on, man. It's kind of, I'm making fun of it now, but it is a problem I have a little bit with Jojo, where Araki seems to be very careful in how he references prior parts. And I think sometimes he's too careful. I think sometimes he shows too much restraint. Because it's the same thing with what I said earlier with Alessi not turning Joseph young. It's like the reason he doesn't do it is because Araki doesn't want to, connect it too much to part 2. But I feel that sometimes it would be really cool and really nice to sort of see those payoffs. Joseph, floating up into the sky and like slowly turning back into like a younger spirit version of himself. I mean, like, oh, Caesar, wait for me. Like, that shit would be cool.
Or maybe if he like lifted up his hand and then like we saw another hand, just a hand with like a bandana on it, reaching down and pulling him in. Yeah,
exactly. And that's something that Araki continues to do, and it continues to irk me. Where it's like, come on, this is an opportunity. Show something from a previous part. There's a really bad one in part 6 that actually gets me mad when I think about it. Where I'm like, come on, man. You had it on a silver platter and you didn't connect it back. But we'll talk about it whenever you watch part 6.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have for part 3. I mean, if you want to be crazy, I'm down for it. Do you want to talk about part 4?
Nah, it's getting kind of late here. If that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. But I just wanted to make sure, in case you were in a JoJo mood, you're like, you know what? Let's keep going.
I'm definitely in a JoJo mood. But I do think it's also neater if we do 4, 5, and 6 together, because they are the other trilogy, the Arrow trilogy.
Yeah, perfect. So this would be the Dio trilogy.
Yeah, or the Mask trilogy. Just everything sort of groups together. And then 7 and 8, and presumably 9 are the what the fuck is going on trilogy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I guess as a last thing about the series before final thoughts or other things, the mask is really cool. I like that you put blood on it and like spikes come out. I
Yes.
don't know, it's just a cool mask. I love the design of it. So
Same.
it's like the source of all our problems. So we should probably bring it once.
So, Ian, do you regret getting into JoJo?
No, absolutely not. If anything, this discussion made it all worth it, definitely. But
Nice.
I've definitely I'm glad to experience this kind of part of anime and manga history. I got some cool new characters that I really love, and some cool memories and concepts and new ways to think about fights and stuff. So yeah, no, overall, I'm very happy to have started this, and thank you for coming along it with me as my guide.
No problem. I'm always happy to guide you through something like this, because I think JoJo is a really fun series to get into, not just because it's a good series by itself, but because it's a weird paradox where if you aren't into it, it seems like a very marginal kind of thing. But then you sort of read the manga, watch the anime, and you realize that this is a massive franchise, one that has had vast influences over the medium and even beyond it. It is one of the few manga to receive a dedicated exhibition at the Louvre, for example. And it's just a cool experience getting into something so rich and so like full of content almost by accident. Because I remember when I got into JoJo, I thought, oh yeah, this is just like, another anime to get into.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, it's literally the granddaddy of tactical shonen fighters.
Yeah, in the West, it doesn't have that kind of reputation. It's just the Mimi show.
Yeah, which is also fun, that you can discover that there's more to it than just, it's an enemy stand. Because just to give you like a sort of, you finished part 4, right? You haven't started part 5 yet.
No. Yeah. Yes to what you said.
Yeah. So to give you like where you are timeline wise, One Piece is still 5 years before it's gonna start publication.
Yeah, I had seen that recently in a JoJo video I watched where it's like, or I think actually, no, you mentioned it in your video. That's where I saw it.
I did.
I was like, holy crap. Yeah.
Yeah, so you are still quite a lot, sort of almost in the dark, shadowy times of the shonen manga, the weekly shonen manga magazine, where it's sort of like, we know these series existed, but it's so outside of what we in the West could experience that we only really talk about it in like a historical sense. Because we just didn't have access to it. So JoJo is this weird paradox where it's written in a time that we are very distant to, but now because of the modern anime, it has this modern twist to it. It has this modern aesthetic. It feels like a modern series.
Not to spoil part 4, like my thoughts on it, but it was really surreal to be like, oh yeah, this kind of feels like, okay, so this is probably like when things got a lot more like it. This is more in like the modern times, right? It's like One Piece doesn't exist yet. I was like, what?
Yeah, it's
it's always fun. I think I literally thought it came out in like the 2000s, part 4. I was like, oh yeah, this seems like it probably came out like the late 90s, early 2000s. I was like, what? No.
Yeah, because all the parts always sort of, they never take place in the year they're released in, I think. None of them do. They're always either a little bit in the future or very in the past.
Okay.
Unless you're called part 8, where it was in the future when it was released, but by the time it ended, it was taking place in the past.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. But all right. So do you have any closing thoughts on what you've experienced with JoJo? Sort of general things you still want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, just overall, I'm really glad I started the series. I think my overall opinion on JoJo's right now at where we're at is that JoJo's is a series that I enjoy thinking about more than I probably enjoyed watching for a lot of it. But there are a lot of things that obviously I did enjoy watching and that will stick with me. And so I'm very happy to have experienced it. And I guess the way I would say it would be like part 1 and 2 was like a real or part 1 was just like a cool like dinner I had, and I had like a good conversation with a person that I'll remember forever. Part 2 is like a rad roller coaster that I would very willingly go on if I came back to that park.
Mm-hmm.
Part 3 is that show that you used to watch because it was right before the show you actually wanted to watch, and you didn't want your parents to take the TV away from you. So you were like, fine, I'll watch JoJo before my favorite show comes on. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, dang, you really got him. Oh, that was fun. And then you finish it and you go on with your life. So, like, that's kind of my vibe for all 3. Good meal, great roller coaster, pretty good show that I'll watch if I have to.
So we figured it out, folks. JoJo is the show that was on before Sonic X on Saturday mornings.
That's true. And unfortunately for JoJo's, we don't go fast. We go very slow. So
no, we go very slow.
But yeah, but overall, it's a net positive, I would say. So I'm glad I started it.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing with part 3 really is just that pace. I mean, it's one of the shortest JoJo parts in terms of chapters, but it has by far the longest adaptation.
Yeah, it is. It's the longest. So I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, because both part 5 and part 6 are longer than it, and they're only 39 episodes.
So you know what? If I ever go back to part 3, I think I'll read it.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that would probably improve it. I think it would give it a more snappy pacing, and plus the art would just be better. So
yeah, I mean, you would get that iconic walking panel of Dio and Jojo.
And maybe that was what kept it from being the sick roller coaster. So you know what? Yeah. But yeah, dude, I'm very excited. But I'll say this. During all this, I'm still very excited for more JoJo, and I want to complete it. Like, we're not just gonna, for people in the future, we're not just gonna be watching the animes. I'm going to be reading the mangas too, for like the stuff that hasn't been adapted. So we're going all in. I'm gonna finish JoJo, and you're gonna get to hear all my thoughts as I journey through it with my man Oceaniz.
Are you gonna watch the live action movies?
Well, thank you guys for watching. This was a great discussion.
I don't recommend you watch them. I think there's only 2 or 1, and they're all part 4. But Jotaro is in them, and the actor, in order to get the hair hat, had to shave the middle of his head so that the sides of his hair could like overlap with the hat. And that's the note I want to leave you on.
Okay. Then yes, JoJo's. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Sign us out, Ocean Man.
Yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time for the next JoJo review. I don't think we're gonna manage an MHA review in the meantime, but the way I'm feeling, I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's just take a little break,
Yeah.
And if that break turns into a hiatus, that turns into a cancellation, it did happen. So
it's what it is, But for now, thank you all for watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Ora!